All right. Welcome, everybody, to the September 4th, 2018 Board of Commissioners meeting. Please silence your cell phones, pagers, and other electronic communication devices. Agendas are located at the back of the chambers for the public to follow along. At this time, I'd like to call the meeting to order, and we'd like to do a moment of silence and reflection, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, and Mr. Lindell Peterson will lead us into that.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Next, we come to review and approval of the agenda. Is there anybody who'd like to make any changes to the agenda?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move 23 Charlie up to just ahead of item 10.
You want to move item 23C up to item 10?
In front of item 10.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second for discussion. Is there any discussion on the reason for wanting to move it up before item 10? Mr. Farabee.
Last meeting, we violated our policy that we passed January 2nd of this year. And I think we ought to talk about it up front before the meeting goes on.
Any further discussion? I think with the load of our agenda, I think it's located appropriately, so I'm not in favor of moving it up. I think it's in the right position, and I think we've got people that have been here for a long time waiting for this, so I'm not in support of the motion. So the motion is to approval of the agenda, moving item 23C up to right after the consent agenda, number 9. Be right in between there. Everybody's clear on that motion?
Yep.
We'll do a roll call vote. All in favor of that motion, indicate by saying aye.
Buskerud,
No.
DeSanto,
Yes.
Farabee,
Yes.
Hadcock,
No.
LaCroix.
No. So now we have no motion on the floor. I'd look for a motion to approve the agenda as stated.
My motion?
Second.
It's been moved by Hadcock, seconded by Busker to approve the agenda. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 3 ayes. Mr. Farabee, no? Let's do a roll call vote, please.
Okay. Buskerud,
Aye.
DeSanto,
Nay.
Farabee. Okay.
Farabee left the room.
Okay. Hadcock
Aye.
and LaCroix.
Aye. Thank you. Next, with the approval of the agenda, this comes to the consent agenda. I recognize Commission Manager Holly Hennies.
Good morning, Commissioners. Holly Hennies, Commission Office Manager. For public notice, the Board of Commissioners uses a consent agenda to act on non-controversial and routine items. The consent agenda is acted upon by one motion and vote of the board. Items may be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda at the request of a board member or a citizen. Today's consent agenda contains the following items: approval of the minutes from the regular meeting of August 21st, 2018. Number 6 is to schedule a public hearing at 9:15 a.m. on Tuesday, September 18th for General Fund Budget Supplement SP 18-010 for the General Fund John T. Vakurovitz budget. Number 7 is approval of the request for a Pennington County resolution supporting the awarding of a CRISI grant for the upgrading of the Rapid City Pier and Eastern Main Line between Rapid City and Fort Pierre. Number 8 is approval of the Emergency Management 2019 State and Local Agreement, Subrecipient Agreement, as submitted by Emergency Management. And finally, number 9 is to declare a pressure washer from the highway shop surplus for the purpose of disposal.
Thank you, Holly. Is there any member of the public like anything from the consent agenda removed for consideration? Seeing none, all from any items from consent from the commission? See none, I'd look,
Approval of the consent agenda, Chairman?
it's been moved by Hadcock, second by Busker to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Please make note that Mr. Farabee had left the meeting with his packet
At
in the minutes,
9:07.
please.
Okay.
Next, we come to regular agenda items, items from the Highway Department. Item A, Trans-Canada Highway Department informal presentation. I'll recognize Mark Schock.
Good morning, Mark Schock, Pennington County Highway. And today I have Robert Latimer with Trans-Canada with me. We plan to give a short presentation regarding the activities that Trans-Canada will carry out in Pennington County over the next year, starting the fall of 2019 and over the next year and a half. Information will include how preparation and construction of the Keystone XL Pipeline will affect Pennington County highway system roads.
Commissioners, again, my name is Robert Latimer. I work out of our project office in Omaha, Nebraska. It's an honor to be here, and I'm glad that we can provide a little bit of information to you this morning. The Keystone XL Pipeline project is a project stretching from the Port of Morgan area in Montana to Steel City, Nebraska, crossing 3 states. It's been under considerable review over the last 10 years. We have a presidential permit in hand, a permit from the state of Montana. In South Dakota, the project has been reviewed and approved twice by the South Dakota Public Utilities Commission. And we also have an approval for a mainline alternative route in Nebraska. With that said, we've made plans to construct this 36-inch oil pipeline through the various states, Montana, South Dakota, and Nebraska, beginning in 2019 with some pre-construction activities occurring this fall. Those pre-construction activities require involvement from local county jurisdictions in regards to movement of pipe to stage it closer to the right-of-way. Thus, we're dealing with Pennington County Road District Road Superintendent for some pieces of haul road agreements where we're bringing pipe into a rail spur, and then that pipe would travel on county road to state highway, and then subsequently to pipe yards out along the route of the pipeline in West River Country. We've been visiting with Mark and his team at the Pennington County Road Department in regards to these short pieces of road. One of them happens to be in the Box Elder Spur area, and another road for light-duty traffic is in the Wasta area, north through Wasta to Meade County, again, for light-duty traffic. The work that we're intending to do would be to move carloads of pipe into the Box Elder Spur in the late November time period or late fall time period, and then begin to offload that pipe and then take it out to those pipe yards closer to the pipeline. Mark, do you want to? We've provided some details to Mark in regards to traffic counts and all that sort of thing.
At this time, it appears Trans-Canada will need a haul road agreement to maintain the integrity of our roads and most of all the safety of the traveling public. One will be on the screen here now. It's a short stretch of Highway 1416 and Liberty Boulevard coming from the transload in Box Elder, just east of Box Elder, up to Interstate 90. They will affect this road short-term, matter of mid-20 days, sometime in the coming fall.
So, Mark, you're figuring about 20 days? Is that what?
On this particular haul
Okay.
agreement, yes, on this segment of road. We'll go here.
Commissioners, the South Dakota Public Utilities Commission mandates that we have to put a bond in place to protect county roads and state highways for that matter. That bond is equivalent to $15.6 million. We've passed a copy of that bond to Mark. We also do a pre-activity, pre-impact assessment of the roads, and engineering study, and we provide that to Mark pre-use and post-use, and then of course we visit with the county road superintendents and their staff in regards to as that work takes place.
Thank you. That was going to be my next question. So that. I was going to ask how you measure from before and after, but you answered that. So thank you.
One other road here that will be affected on the project is Elm Springs Road, and it's a gravel road. A small portion of it is asphalt coming out of the town of Wasta. The rest of it, 5 miles of it being gravel. That'll be a more long-term road. That'll transport workers and some materials to and from the work sites, but will not involve heavy hauling the trucks with pipe loaded on them.
Okay. Does the board have any questions?
And was the bond, but
This is just an informational. Mr. DeSanto.
Will the construction there at 4416 and Liberty Boulevard be all done by that time? They're still working on it, I think.
That pipe will be hauled this fall over a 20-something day period, and then that haul road agreement will be closed. It will be re-inspected for any damages. Any damages occurred have to be submitted in writing to TransCanada within 30 days, and they have that $15.6 million bond in
Right.
place to cover those.
What I was asking, Mark, is there's currently, I believe, construction going on at that intersection. Is that done?
There is no construction on the county roads
But
there
when
in
they
that
turn
area.
on to Liberty?
No.
Okay, all right.
There was, okay, that might have been the chip seal operation earlier this summer that you saw in that area, but yes, that's been done for quite some time.
Okay.
Any further discussions? No. Any questions from the public? Doesn't look like it. There's no action needed. So we thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation.
Thank you.
thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Item number 11, Mr. Lindell Peterson. Former commissioner, former legislator, Rail Authority.
Ag award.
Mr.
winner.
Chairman, members of the commission, it's a little bit different standing here than sitting up there, but the focus of my remarks today relate to the MRC Rail Authority, which is the Mitchell to Rapid City Rail Authority, which was formed years ago to direct the activity on the state-owned rail right-of-way. The authority was formed in 1987, and Pennington County did not join that until 1993. The participation of Pennington County on that board varied from time to time and went dormant. And then in the last few years, Holly picked up some information that made us wonder whether we should or should not be active in that organization. At that time, the commission chose to designate myself and Commissioner Hadcock as commissioners on the MRC, and we have attended, either myself or Commissioner Hadcock, both every meeting since that time. It's been about 3 years, I believe. And during that time, there has been absolutely no reference to Pennington County or any activity in Pennington County on that rail authority. There is no rail from Kadoka to Rapid City. It's been removed. The right-of-way exists and is held by the state. The only structure other than culverts between Kadoka and Rapid City is the Cheyenne River Bridge that still remains. In the course of activity, the organization has fostered rail traffic, commercial development west of the river recently, and is hoping to get rail service to Murdo. The structure is such that the MRC, the Rail Authority, can borrow money from the state rail fund. And in that respect, if the money that's borrowed, if the operator goes into default, then the property taxes of each county stand liable for paying that. There is contention with the rail operator presently. In my opinion, the entire state rail authority program needs to be looked at by the state and restructured. But at this point in time, given the fact that the only activity between the state DOT and Pennington County relative to this right-of-way is the weed spraying contract with the Pennington County Weed Department. And that is done outside the purview of the MRC itself. So in that respect, my observations are that there's no reason for Pennington County to remain, and would recommend that you institute activity to separate yourselves in Pennington County from the MRC.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. I didn't happen to read the agenda before, or the item before we started. This is a resolution of withdrawal from the Mitchell and Rapid City Rail Authority. And Mr. Peterson, I would just want to thank you for your service on continuing on and your blunt honesty on what's happening with this authority. With that, I'll open it up to the commission.
Chairman,
Ms. Hadcock.
I agree with Lindell on withdrawing for the same reasons. We could be liable. We're not really a part of it. A lot of times we would just sit there in discussion that had nothing to do with us. So maybe it's good to hear what other people are doing, but I think the main issue here is if this fails, then Pennington County is part of that, paying some of that money back. And I think at this point, it'd be a good idea to withdraw.
Is there any further discussion?
Sure.
Mr. DeSanto.
Lindell, I'm in agreement with this as well. However, I'm wondering, it seems like there's some plans in the future to continue the bike path on that railroad bed out to Scenic, I believe, is what they were thinking about doing. Is that in any way going to, us getting out of this, is it in any way going to affect that ability to use that railroad bed to do that bike trail?
There would be no connection between the MRC Rail Authority and that activity.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Buskerud?
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution of withdrawal and have your signature to it.
Second?
It's been moved by Buskerud, seconded by DeSanto to approve the resolution to request a withdrawal of the Pennington County from the MRC Regional Rail Authority. Any further discussion from the public? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Lindell, for your service. Next, that brings us to item number 12. Mr. Bruce Ellis, requesting the formation of the Hard Rock Mining Committee. Mr. Bruce
Good morning. It's Ellison.
Ellison, sorry.
A number of months ago, this commission decided to put off the creation of a hard rock mining committee to draft a hard rock mining ordinance, the commission having split off the desire to have a hard rock mining ordinance and, for want of a better term, a non-rock hard mining ordinance, so that's pretty hard rock. I have come to talk with the commission about requesting the start of meetings, hearings to put together a committee to draft a hard rock mining ordinance. This commission decided not to proceed with the hard rock mining ordinance because there was litigation that was pending against the gravel ordinance. I have visited with counsel on that. I know it's being appealed. The commission decided to appeal that issue to the Supreme Court. The reason why I am requesting that this commission consider starting the process for the hard rock mining ordinance now is because really that lawsuit has nothing to do with either the composition of the committee that drafted that ordinance or with the substance of that ordinance. It is simply a procedural appeal as to once this commission passes an ordinance, as to the required number of notices that must be given the public, as to the public's exercise of its right to a referendum should it choose. So therefore, the hard rock mining ordinance has no reason to wait. And the reason why I'm urging the commission to reconsider its decision is because this could take a year, it could take 2 years to draft an ordinance if the commission, and I believe it is, serious about drafting an ordinance that means something, protects the interests and people of South Dakota, of Pennington County in particular. So I did see on the agenda item, and I'm not sure if this is even covers under Part 23C, the reconsideration of an action taken by the board. So I apologize if I'm not doing this right. But I just want to urge this. This is really going to take a long time. It's going to take a while, and you're going to need input as to what that committee should be composed of. It's going to take a while in this committee, and then the commission and the committee itself is going to need time to hear from the community, to hear from all of the interests that are involved, to put together something that, as I said, is a real ordinance, not just something that's a revenue-gaining thing, but something that's real. So what I would urge is the commission reconsider its decision to put on abeyance and to set a time. And I'd like to encourage 2 different days, I don't know, half day, a day, whatever may be possible, or longer sessions for a regular meeting, where these 2 issues be notice to the public, that the public come in and address what should that committee be composed of, who should it be composed of, from our community, and what is the purpose of that committee? What is the mission? What is the goal of that ordinance? So again, there's no reason to wait. This will take a long time. It's best if we don't be in a situation where we have to be rushing to do something. While it looks like we have a little bit of time, do we have a year? Do we have 2 years? It's hard to know. So with that, I thank the commissioners for their time, and I would be happy to answer any questions or if the public has any.
Thank you, Bruce. I think what I'll do is I'll go to the commission for comment. You've given us some good ideas of what you'd like to see, but I'll go to the commission before I make a comment.
Do you want me to stand here, Mr. LaCroix?
Yeah, you can
Okay,
wait
thank you.
here. Mr. Busker.
I agree with Mr. Ellison. I think the procedural question that's in front of the Supreme Court really probably has nothing to do with this committee. And I would like to see Commissioner Hadcock, since she's acquainted with the other part of this, and I agree, it wasn't the committee's fault or the ordinance's fault. It was probably the way we did it, and although we disagree with that too, we think we did it the right way. But anyway, I would agree. I think and it's maybe time, and it'll take a while, and
Chairman?
I would have no problem doing that.
Since Ms. Hadcock's name was brought up, I'll recognize Ms. Deb Hadcock.
To me, I think you should wait for the new commission to come on board. They might have a different idea, and then we would be handing something over that we decided at this board. I think also, for me, the litigation does make a difference. If we're going to republish it, and then when does that republication start? If we lose that case, then it wasn't published, and it has to come through this commission again. So it does make a difference. And right now, I don't think there's a hurry for a hard rock mining committee in Pennington County because we have no hard rock mining going on in Pennington County. Do we need a hard rock mining for the future? I believe we do, sir, but I don't think we should be in a hurry to get it done. I'd like to see, to me, the litigation does make a difference in case, depends on what that comes to pass as. And number two, again, we're going to have a whole new board in January, not a whole new board, but we'll have different people that I think should have a part of that say.
May I respond to one of the points of Commissioner Hancock?
Mr. Bruce.
Ma'am, with all due respect, I don't understand how what's in litigation would affect the creation of a hard rock mining ordinance. If the Supreme Court were to rule that this commission needs to renotice the other ordinance, and even if that notice was given, the citizens decided to refer it, and that vote was taken, that would have absolutely nothing to do with the substance and the creation of the hard rock mining ordinance. Absolutely nothing. Because if the ordinance that the commission has encouraged that it wants to work on, if that takes a year or 2 years, we'll have a decision from the Supreme Court. It really only be a question of once the hard rock ordinance was passed, what notice needs to be given the public. So there really is nothing that procedurally or substantively would interfere with the nature of the committee, the formation of the committee, its composition. Thank you, ma'am.
Then I disagree, because if I worked with a committee for a year and then it gets referred, which is the right of the people, if that fails, then we're going to start another committee doing the same thing when we really don't have any hard rock mining going on in Pennington County. I mean, like I said, I don't believe there's a hurry to do a hard rock mining ordinance. I also know that the staff at this point are very overloaded, and they would have to be a part of this because they are doing a lot of the comprehensive plan and some other things. So it's not that we're going to put it off forever. It's that at the timing right now, I don't believe is the time to get it done or started. I think with the staff and everybody else from the old one and the comprehensive plan and things we were doing, I think we have a little bit more time to put it off until we get everything else situated that needs to get done beforehand. I think PJ can actually attest to his workload and what's happening in the planning department, and they do help us, and they have to help us with doing a hard rock mining. That staff has been a crucial part of our mining committee, and they are huge in moving forward on this hard rock mining. So to me, putting it off a little bit longer, but not, forever, I believe is something that is needed at this time, not just because of litigation, sir.
Something as important as this.
Okay, Bruce, I understand we're getting a lot of back and forth. I want to give the rest of the commission some chances to.
Thank you.
Mark,
Chair,
did you?
I'm in agreement that we should start working on this. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, we have a company that's currently looking at mining. If I'm PJ, do we have anyone applying for a permit for mining up by Pace Law?
No. They're doing drilling, tests.
Drilling tests,
Yeah.
which would tell me that they're planning sometime in the near future, if they find what they're looking for.
They
that they're-
found it.
They're gonna start mining.
Up to 10 years.
And I also agree that it's two separate ordinances. It's not gonna be, it's not gonna have anything to do. By the time, the decision is made on the original ordinance, we'll know how many times we need to notify the public. And we can put off actually adopting that ordinance, even if we put the committee together, came up with the ordinance, agreed on the ordinance, we can wait to adopt the ordinance until we've figured out whether or not we have to give, how much notice we have to give to the public at that point in time. So again, I think that it's gonna take a long time, obviously, and it'd be a good idea to get started now. And as far as the new commissioners are concerned, that turnover period, we won't be so far into it in the next 3 months, as you know, from sitting on the committee for the last one, how long it takes to get something done. We won't be that far along that they won't be able to catch up if they're actually included in the committee in the first place.
Thank you, Mark. Bruce, my thoughts on this is I think this commission's committed to forming that committee. I think, in my personal opinion, you have a great suggestion, because what you first started out saying is have a public meeting, and that's one thing that we haven't done yet, is established. We started talking about the types of people we wanted on the board, that type of thing. I think you're right on that part, that we need to have a pre-meeting to determine how we're going to choose the people to be on it, get some public input on that, because there's been I've sat down with a lot of people that think we need a wide variety of people, and we need to be conscious that we don't put 30 people on there, because 30 people's minds are different from everybody's, and we could go for 5 years on this. Sure. I'm not opposed to that, but one of the key things I heard from the commissioners this morning was they would like the input of the new commissioners. And I think that is very much important. And so I would suggest, this is my suggestion, that you lay out your diagram in a written note, send it to Holly, of how you're talking about a couple half meetings and the discussion parts. And it sounds to me like you've got a pretty good plan of how you'd like to see this go. If you could lay that out to Holly, I definitely would look at it. And if we could figure out the time, I'm saying probably November sometime, late November or early December, maybe we could set up some hearings and meetings, or start talking about that. December is a bad time to be setting up meetings.
Sure.
So I'm still talking probably January, but at least we could get this rolling, and maybe, would that help?
It certainly would, sir. I will put something together and get it to Holly. And I do thank the commission for its time, if that is the final decision, that we're going to wait. But I just want to help make this process happen.
Bruce, would you like a motion on that?
Yes, sir, please.
Okay. I don't know how to explain that motion. I guess the motion would instruct Bruce to come up with a draft of help me out, BJ, draft of a formation of the Hard Rock Committee, plan and
Composition and purpose.
composition and purpose. Very good.
Would that be a fair?
I would say so.
I will do that and send that to the committee,
So-
pending on vote.
Okay.
Made a
Everybody,
motion, I'll second it.
okay, motion was made by LaCroix, seconded by DeSanto. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
No.
Oh, one no from Ms. Hadcock. One no.
Ms. Hadcock,
What's that?
no from,
Yeah, I said one no from Ms. Hadcock.
thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. Next, we come to public hearings. Title III, public input on proposed projects. And I'll recognize Scott.
Good morning, Commissioners. Scott Guffey, Pennington County Natural Resources Director. This is a public comment period for the Title III dollars or funds that come from the Secured Schools Rules Act, Committee Act. By law or statute, we have to do a 45-day comment period to advertise it. We've done the advertising. It has to be done before September 30th of the current year for funds to be used in 2019. So I don't believe we've received any written comments. Holly's shaking her head. But you can open up the floor for any public comments.
Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak on behalf of the Title III Public Input Project? Seeing none, do you have the motion you need to?
Yeah, I think it just needs to be recognized in the minutes that you've opened up for comments and none were received, and we're good to go then.
That is correct.
All right, thank you, that was easy.
Do we need a motion?
I think it just needs to be put in the minutes, yeah.
Okay. Public hearing.
I've got a deal. This is the Board of Commissioners will take public input on the Pennington County's use of the Title III funds for the following proposed projects for 2019, the wildland firefighter equipment and training, increasing in the protection of people and property from wildfire and insect infestations, emergency response equipment or vehicles, search and rescue response, training, and other emergency services as allowed by the Secured Rural Schools and Self-Determination Act of 2008. The total estimated cost of these projects are $31,139.
34,139.
Yes.
34.
Yep, and that's what we advertised.
That's what you
Yep.
advertise.
Okay.
Okay. We're okay? I'm always looking for approval, make sure we don't need a motion. I don't want to,
Exactly how you just read it, sir, is the motion.
okay,
Second?
okay. I was moved by LaCroix, seconded by DeSanto. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next, we come to item 14, items from the auditor. I'll
Morning,
recognize-
Commissioners. Cindy Moeller with the Pennington County Auditor's Office. Before you, we have supplement 18009 and operating transfer. This is a supplement to the accumulated buildings fund operating transfer out, and the operating transfer is to the capital projects fund. The amount is for $4,500,000. And this is just basically moving the cash from one fund to another so that we can continue to pay the bills on the construction projects.
Okay. Any questions from the commission? Any from the public? I'd look for a motion to approve the 2018 accumulated building operating transfer out budget from supplement amount of $4.5 million to authorize operating transfer in the same amount to the accumulated building fund in the capital projects fund.
Be my motion.
Moved by Hadcock, seconded by LaCroix. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cindy. Item 15, emergency management.
Hope you all read this book.
Took a speed reading course on Friday and read it on Saturday.
Morning, Commission. Dustin Willett. I'm the Director of Emergency Management for Pennington County. Before you is the local emergency operations plan. It is a protected document under codified law because of some of the contact information and some of the content that's in that plan as well. Every year we approve and adopt a current version of that plan. There are small changes made. We've had some changes in names of fire departments. Battle Creek Fire Department is a new one, so we go through and we make sure that those changes are current and relevant. So the hazmat annual, the annual hazmat response plan is something that's looked at by our local emergency planning committee annually, and any, again, small changes that are made to that plan are adopted then into the LEOP. And then the other annex that we added this year in collaboration with multiple stakeholders across the community, especially with the sheriff's office in their role as with coroner investigations and deaths in Pennington County. We have the mass fatality annex that's been added to that, which is basically none of these plans are lockstep, detailed, tactical type plans, because those types of events are so dynamic. You need room to be able to adapt what you're doing to what's happening on the ground. However, we like to put in some type of framework, some type of strategy that guides us along responding to those types of incidents. So we have a very large framework for responding to mass fatality incidents in Pennington County, and work on that will continue to go on and continue to be refined. But that's a new annex that's part of that LEOP this year. I'd be happy to stand for any appropriate questions, and if there's things that we need to do not in the public venue, that's fine too, but certainly willing to stand for any questions.
Dustin, this reviewed yearly?
What's that?
Is this reviewed yearly?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any questions from the commission?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. DeSanto?
I think it's important to point out to the board that how our importance in this, the decision-making process in the local emergency operations plan, and that we make the decisions as to far as, you know, how to determine whether or not, along with our staff, as to whether or not we need to ask for a state of emergency, request funds from the state or the federal government to help us with things like that. And I just think it's important for the public to know that we as commissioners are responsible for doing that. You know, like when it came to Storm Atlas, making the decision as to whether or not to declare a state of emergency, get a hold of the governors, put all that into operation and get it moving. So I just wanted to comment on that. And I think, Dustin, this is very thorough. And I went to the meeting that we had, 6 months ago on basically addressing a large-scale problem like Atlas or the flood. And it was a lot came to light in that, and the amount of the number of people that are involved in getting an action plan put together for something like that is amazing. And it's fantastic that Pennington County has the capability to do that, and the technology to do that. So thank you, Dustin.
You're welcome.
I agree, Dustin. I think the flood brought our community together to where we learned to adopt and plan accordingly. And I think you're absolutely right when you said there is no set plan. You have to roll with the changes and make them quickly and make the decisions quickly. And I think keeping everybody informed and moving is very important. And I think this community does a good job at that.
I would agree. I think we've learned some hard lessons in the community, and I'm proud of where we are as a response in a disaster preparedness community. But we never rest on our laurels. There's always ways to do things better, and we'll continue to power on. So thank you for your continued support. And again, I just look for a motion to approve the current iteration of the local emergency operations plan.
I would make a motion to approve the 2018 local emergency operations plan for Pennington County.
Moved by DeSanto,
Second.
seconded by Buskerud. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you,
Dustin.
Commissioners.
Next, we come to item number 16, items from Human Resources, the Pennington County Employee Handbook updates. Now, I'll recognize John Morrow.
Good morning, Commissioners. John Morrow, Pennington County HR Director. So this is an item that was continued from the last meeting so that you'd have more time to review the updates and changes that were being proposed. The handbook, as mentioned before, was last reviewed in 2013, printed in 2014. We've worked on this since January to review and update some minor wording changes. There's some additional new policies, if you will, that were updated as well to make sure that we were addressing the things that we needed to, where there had been just slight changes again needed. So we did work closely with the leadership structure within the county and partnered with the Sheriff's Department HR group as well to make sure that we were making these broad enough that they could apply for each department. and yet specific enough that they could be actionable if necessary. So the goal here today is to receive a motion to approve the updated handbook as presented, so that we can actually put this out on our intranet and then get some copies printed for distribution within the county as well.
Okay. Is there any discussion from the board?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. DeSanto?
John, I was concerned about and I'm not finding it now, an asterisk that I found at some point early on and I should have marked it with my highlighter, but I didn't. Having to do with elected officials, including the Board of Commissioners, the sheriff, the state's attorney, being included in the rules of the handbook. Not that I don't want to be held accountable, just like every other employee of the county. But I think as far as the elected officials is concerned, I'm a little leery about including in all of this. I don't know what Jay might have to say about that, but.
Mr. DeSanto, can I interrupt just a second? Would it happen to be the one with social media, elected officials and social media?
Maybe it was limited to that.
I remember reading through that, and
Where is it? You know where I'm talking about, John?
I'm not. So the only changes were the ones that were actually listed on the two-page document. Anything else that was in the handbook is continued from the last revision back in 2013.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to hold everybody up by thumbing through all these pages again, but maybe, oh, here we go, social media.
What section is it, Mark?
2.10.
Okay.
Page 26.
Sure, that wouldn't be a section that we would have updated.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'll read through it some more. If I have an issue, I'll come to you and talk to you about
Most
it.
definitely.
okay. Because I think most of the changes now, Steph, you and Steph both worked on this together and had some changes.
We did. We actually incorporated a few of the policies that the Sheriff's Department had on their broader range of policies there. So when you look at some of these that we've actually included, so I worked with Dustin actually in emergency management with the attendance policy as well as with the rest of the departments. And then record retention was done with the Sheriff's Department. We talked about time off. We talked about scheduling because of the Sturgis Rally and their special hires to help support that. There were a number of different pieces where we went back and forth to make sure that we had it and that the wording was done, again, broad enough that it could apply for the departments, yet specific enough that they could be actionable if necessary. And the departments, as you realize, I'm hoping that they still have the discretion to actually take this policy and then make them more strict within their departments. If they've got reporting requirements for attendance or different dress code requirements based upon their interactions with the community, there's some flexibility, if you will, within those as well.
Yeah. And I was on the compensation committee meeting. I know a lot of this was cleaned up and had been saved for quite a while to be coming forward. So I support the document that you guys worked together with to come up with these changes. We're looking for a motion to approve, to adopt the 2018, to approve the updated Pennington County Employee Handbook as presented.
So moved.
Moved by Hadcock, seconded by LaCroy. Further discussion, any from the public? Any from the board? If not, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thanks,
Thank you,
John and
Commissioners.
Steph, for you guys' work on this, and the compensation committee. It looks like we have about 8 minutes till 10 o'clock to do the public hearing. Oh, we can move right along, can't we?
Move table 17, then move forward.
I think we can, we'll have required public hearings that. I would probably suggest we take a 5-minute break and then come back and keep going, because the rest of it's gonna be a long agenda. It's been it's moved and seconded to take a break till 10 o'clock. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Come out of break. All right, everybody, we're coming out of break. Next item on our agenda is public hearing, the SDL 721 consideration of the fiscal year 2019 provisional budget as annual budget appropriations, expenditures, revenues for Pennington County, South Dakota. We have a couple of appendixes, which is A, Sheriff's Office Budget Request 2019. I'll recognize Cindy.
Good morning again, Commissioner. Cindy Moeller with the Auditor's Office. Now is the time that we have scheduled for the 2019 budget hearings, the public hearings. I did find that we do need to make, or I would recommend that we do make a motion to reduce the revenue for dispatch for $60,000. And then that will be coming out of reserves. They were entered into a contract with the state, and the state was to pay them $60,000 by July of 2019. So they included that in their 2019 budget, anticipating it would be then. We've actually received that in July of this year.
Okay, so Cindy, we should actually make a motion on that one first as we move down, right?
Yes.
And the deal is they paid us a year early instead of a year later, so you're just adjusting the budget.
Yes.
Is there any questions from the board? From public? I'd look for a motion to reduce the 2019 dispatch revenues by $60,000.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by DeSanto, seconded by Buschrood. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
The other item on my memo is the motion for the Sheriff's Office. I don't know if somebody's here that would like to explain all those changes for us.
Recognize Kevin Tome, Sheriff.
Morning, Kevin Tone, Pennington County Sheriff, and you have the memo that we sent you. It doesn't change the bottom line on the budget, but when you do the way the motion was made, when you do it across the board cut, our budget is complicated and we have different revenues and partnerships. For example, detox. If you cut $1, really you're cutting 50 cents because it's 50% funded by the city, 50% funded by the county. So we're just asking for flexibility, work with the auditor's office to change these categories around so it didn't have a even more adverse impact on the budget than the cuts that were proposed. So just ask for approval of the motion as stated in the memo to you.
Okay. Is there any questions from the board? Seeing none, any from the public? Seeing none, I'd look for a motion to authorize the auditor to make the changes to the 6th Sheriff's Office budget as follows. The budget increase for law enforcement by $124,722. Increase jail by $36,794, reduce JSC by $14,212, increase juvenile alternative by $12,015, reduce city county alcohol and drug programs by $146,428, and increase search and rescue by $433, and the revenues reduce JSC secure by $4,176. And increase juvenile alternatives by $17,500.
I'll make that motion.
Moved by Buschrood,
Second.
seconded by Hadcock. Any further discussion? Any from the public? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Kevin. Cindy, we have one more motion to make.
Yes. I did receive the final growth numbers and the final utility numbers from the State Department of Revenue this last week. I'd like a chance to work those into the budget and make sure that we have as accurate a numbers in the final budget as possible. So I would like to continue this until September 18th.
That'd be my motion.
Second.
Moved by Hadcock, seconded by Buschrood to continue the fiscal year 2019 budget to the September 18th Board of Commissioner meeting for final numbers. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Cindy.
Mr. Chair, this is the legally required time for anybody to comment on anything that has to do with the budget. So you want to make sure you call for public comments on anything related to the budget, because it was advertised for 10 o'clock today.
Oh,
Just before you move on, make sure we cover that and give everybody the opportunity.
okay. I did read it, but I didn't give option. Is there anybody from the public who would like to speak about the fiscal year 2019 budget? Thank you, folks. Next, we come to isolated track, item number 18. Mr. Robert L. and Miss Barbara Steele. Ma'am, you are Barbara?
I'm Barbara
Okay.
Steele, and I'm here on the south half of Lot 3 in Government Lot 3. And we have no access at now. And we have talked to the surrounding landowners. And as of now, we have nobody willing to give us access to our property. And so we talked to them, and we're here today to ask that it be declared an isolated lot.
Okay. Barbara, how long ago have you started on this?
About 4 years ago.
About 4 years ago. Okay. Does staff have any refresher that update or a little bit of background do you have?
A little bit of background. PJ Conover, Director of Planning Department. Just one thing before we get into it, remember, this is off of Bratsky Road, which has exceeded the limit of residents allowed through building permits without coming before the board. So just one thing to keep in mind as we move forward. I believe the state's attorney's office had asked that additional information and all the information they could find be gathered. We, staff had looked through the paperwork, and from what we can determine, it is isolated. That's pretty much the update that I have.
Okay. Is there anybody else who wants to speak on, sir?
Commissioners, my name is Quentin Riggins. I am an attorney at Gunderson Palmer Law Firm here in Rapid City. I represent Frank and Kathy Comerford, as well as Kathy C. Lazy T. Ranch LLC. We have had discussions regarding this specific property and whether or not my clients would allow access over their private driveway. The issue we have there is the driveway is not up to county specifications. It would be very difficult to bring it up to county specifications because there's a narrow portion of the roadway that's over the dam grade at a dam located adjacent to the roadway. So my clients did have significant concerns with respect to use of their roadway for safety concerns, as well as the belief that there is also access available by a section line to the north of the property, and that could be developed into a roadway brought up to county specifications that would eliminate some of these safety concerns.
Okay, thank you, Quentin. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak? We got another person?
This is my mother, Barbara Steele, and
you
I
are?
guess, is there anything?
You need to identify yourself for the record.
Robert Steele.
Okay, Robert.
I guess, yeah, there is a section line, but then we still have to have access across the next neighbor's yard to get there. And the amount of money that it would cost to bring that road in there would be more than the land itself is worth. So.
And the way I understand it, it is not, if it isn't on a section line, it doesn't have to be to county specifications if it's a driveway.
Yeah, we're not clear.
Okay.
So, and we just think the least of impact would be the one that would be Comerford's Road, because there's already the dam that exists there. If we were to go across the section line, we'd have to build a dam, whatever, you know, I mean, it gets beyond, you know, financial means to get it done.
The section line is on the north of us, and then we would have to come across the Wardell and or the Newton property to
Right.
get to our property.
Okay.
So that would be, and then we would have to build a county road to specifications. And in our summary of judgment, the judge said that we were landlocked.
Okay, Barbara and Robert, I want to ask our attorney Jay if he could give us some background on possible steps. I know we could do a motion to declare it, or I guess we have two options. We could declare the property legally described as an isolated tract, then we have to set up meetings and meet at the property and look at and come up with ideas and damages and so forth. Or what other options?
May I add one more thing? Those roads, those two roads that were going in there existed long before the Comerfords or anybody bought it. We purchased it in '77.
Okay,
So, anyway,
thanks, Robert.
thank you.
Jay Alderman with the State's Attorney's Office. One thing, if I may, just a preliminary matter, I noticed in the, what I'll call the application of Robert and Barbara Steele, it was received in the Commission Office on August 15th, 2018. It lists a legal description of the tract of land that's at issue here. And at the beginning of it says the south half of Lot 33.
I know it should have been 3. I
Should have been
realized
3?
that.
Okay. Just so that we know we're talking about the right legally described parcel. Your steps, then, today you could, I guess assuming there's no other landowners, we did send out a letter to a number of folks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, including the Steels. I think you've heard from the council for 2 of them. Am I right, Quentin? I'm not hearing anyone say that they're not isolated. If I can clarify, Quentin, are your clients saying that the Steels are not isolated?
No, we believe they're isolated.
Okay.
We just think the section line is not reaching the property.
Okay. So the first step, commissioners, is that you would need to determine that the piece of property that's at issue here today is in fact isolated. If you were to say it's not, then that ends the matter. If you find that it's isolated, then all those other steps in statute come into play. Obviously, your foremost, the next step is to start looking at options. And I don't see anything up on the screen, I guess, probably to assist the commission. If you were to determine today that it's isolated, maybe at the next meeting you would ask folks to come back with a clear PowerPoint or some kind of presentation that could be thrown up on the screen so everybody could clearly see, here's recommended Route 1, here's recommended Route 2, and so on, so that everybody, the potentially affected adjacent landowners, as well as the Steels, as well as our highway department, whoever, and obviously yourselves, you could physically, visually see where these routes are, and at some point, you have to give notice to landowners and actually go out and visit the site physically, do a field trip, and pick out a route. You have to lay out that route. I assume that means maybe our highway department putting out some flagging or something to kind of identify the route. Then you have to assess damages, meaning you have to determine what the Steels would have to pay an adjacent landowner or landowners if in fact the route went across more than one landowner, what they'd have to pay them for damages, because this is eminent domain. It's a condemnation action by the board. Obviously, you have to assess an amount that, I don't know how other guidance to give you, but is definitely reasonable, somewhat akin to, I'm assuming, market value. That's where probably our highway department and equalization can assist you. Because if you assess an amount of damages, as you know from reading the statutes, that's less than what a circuit court might give an appellant who felt they weren't given enough money, they have recourse to seek expenses and costs from their appeal and so forth. So it's a serious deal. You got to come up with a very reasonable and substantial amount to cover what that condemnation would be. The stills are responsible for the expenses and so forth of laying it out, maintaining it, and so forth.
So Jay, I think just from what Jay's told me, what you've said so far, I think the proper way to go on this right now would probably have you guys work with the planning department to give us a presentation at our next meeting before we make a quick decision. I mean, that's just my suggestion. I don't know what the rest of the board's thinking, but my suggestion would be, as Jay was saying, come up with some of the plats, put them up here so we can visually see what's going on. So if the commission decides to make an isolated track, before we set a date and time to go out and do all that stuff, we have what's in front of us to do it with.
And if I may, Commissioner LaCroix, that would be awesome if the stills would have their, because that's actually in statute, that as part of their application, they have to define or identify their preferred route. So they need to literally do that by law. They need to provide you with something with that level of clarity. But I would also encourage any adjacent landowner to do the same thing, for the reason being that if the stills come back in 2 weeks and present, here's where we'd like to go, but there's an adjacent landowner that doesn't feel that's appropriate, and then begins to talk to you about another route that is not up on the screen. Now, once again, you're in some degree of confusion. So I would encourage, if someone has an opposite opinion of where a route should go, they too should come forward with some level of PowerPoint or something where you can compare those two in front of you and know what they're talking about. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Buskard.
Ms. Steele, did I hear you say that a court has declared this a landlocked piece of property? Same difference, Jay, isn't it?
Well, in that court opinion, I don't know that the court looked at every option with regard to isolated tracks. I think the court was opining on the 33-foot easement that was at issue.
Oh,
And opine that 33-foot easement does not exist for the stills use for technical reasons. They said it was not properly identified, the servient and tenement and so forth. There's other matters. I mean, they have to meet a certain acreage, which I believe they do.
We do.
It's around 16 acres, so that clearly meets the acreage. The court in that case, was not looking at the other two easements that Barbara mentioned in her application, but I think planning department would tell you they have looked at those other two easements and don't find that they provide any access to the stills. I haven't heard anyone else saying there's any other access. They're not adjacent to a public highway already, nor do they touch a section line that could be used. So it would appear to me, unless someone else has some other testimony or evidence, it would appear to me that they are, in fact, as defined in Chapter 3122, isolated.
So Barbara and Robert, is 2 weeks enough time to gather some information, or would you need a little more time than that?
No, I think we could do it in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Okay. Commission, it sounds like that the applicants would like to continue this for 2 weeks
Okay.
at your request. Is there any comments?
I guess what I want to
Okay. Go ahead, Jay.
clarify, Mr. Chairman, is does the board want to entertain today, to set the stage, a motion finding that the tract is in fact isolated? Because 2 weeks from now, we're not continuing that question, are we? We're just continuing the further steps of this process for 2 weeks. Or do you want to continue the idea of whether it's isolated or not for 2 weeks?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. DeSanto.
Jay, help me out with this. The last sentence of 31-22-1, a tract of land adjoining a section line right-of-way for at least 66 feet is not an isolated tract if a passable road can be built within the adjoining section line to connect to a passable public highway.
Correct.
Sounds to me like you can, I mean, it's expensive.
We're at about 700 feet from the county.
Well, this says
section line.
at least 6. So what I'm saying is the fact that you're 700 feet qualifies you for that sentence, that you have at least 66 feet.
Commissioner DeSanto, my understanding of that is you have, excuse me, the alleged isolated tract of land has to literally be touching
That's 66.
a section line 466 feet or whatever it reads.
Right.
They don't touch a section line.
They don't.
Their property is here, and the nearest section line is up here, and in between them is private land.
Okay, the section line doesn't touch the north part of your property?
No.
It does not.
Okay,
Section
All right.
line does not touch any part of our property.
okay, thank you.
So you're suggesting that maybe we deal with the isolated track and ask for more information presented at the next meeting?
With regard to proposed routes, which is like kind of the next step. You wouldn't even ask somebody to give proposed routes, frankly, unless
Without-
you've already determined that the property is isolated.
Good point.
So I do have a proposed motion in the event you would like to go that direction.
Would like to hear it.
And just confer with the stills to make sure they like this legal description. So it's that legal description with that one change.
I think it's the south half of
Yeah.
lot 3.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yes.
pretty sure.
So the motion, it's kind of a long motion, but it kind of needs to be. I move that Robert and Barbara Still, as owners of a tract of land legally described as the south half of Lot 3, Section 3, Township 1, South, Range 9, east of the Black Hills Meridian, Pennington County, South Dakota, containing 16 acres more or less, are entitled to an easement or right-of-way across adjacent lands to reach a public highway, as said tract of land meets the minimal acreage requirements established by law, and is isolated as that term is defined in SDCL Chapter 31-22, in that it is not touched by a passable public highway or section line right-of-way and lacks access to a public highway by easement of record.
Could you repeat that?
That's a pretty long.
I'll make that motion.
Motion's been made by Buschard,
Second.
seconded by DeSanto. Any further discussion? Any from the public? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Now, is there a second part to this motion that needs,
We need to make a motion to continue for 2 weeks.
do we have to move to follow the notice of provision of SDCL 3122-2 and serve upon?
If I can explain that a little bit, there's a
Okay.
statute, and these statutes leave a little bit to be desired. They're kind of written a long time ago. But that particular statute that talks about giving the notice to landowners, I believe, is when you actually physically go out to their land and walk on the dirt.
Okay.
My presumption is prior to you wanting to do that, to where you'd go and literally lay out, like, this is the one we want, I would assume, as commissioners, you would like what we talked about earlier, for the landowners of the isolated tract to bring recommended routes to you, any adjacent landowners to bring those to you in this forum, so you could all discuss it, and you could narrow it down to, okay, we're gonna pick one of the following 4 routes. Now let's give that notice and go out. You might even want the highway department to go out and look. But at some point then, you're gonna go out, and that's when you give that notice of a reasonable time to go out and actually walk the dirt and pick a route. Does that make sense?
Yes, and Jay, thank you for walking us through this. As you folks can see, this isn't something we deal with every day. So it's kind of a long, complicated deal, and you've been working on it for 4 years. So we did approve it, so as Jay has said, in 2 weeks, we'll have you back on the agenda, and you can bring us a presentation of what to do, and then we'll start working through with the timeframes and sending the notice out to the property owners and all that type of stuff. But we need to have,
And if you'd like, if you wanted to entertain another motion, you could move to have the Stills bring back their preferred route in a form that can be placed on the screen. You also request that any potentially affected adjacent landowners do the same thing. Holly and I could put together a letter that to everyone that was originally noticed of this, saying exactly what happened, the property has been deemed isolated, and request that you do the following at the next meeting, which is the 18th September.
sure,
Keep everybody informed.
I would think that would be a good motion.
Me too.
I'll make it. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Buskerud.
I'll get it.
You get it, Kara?
Yeah.
Okay, you guys got it? And you guys are understanding what Jay just said?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so we're all on board. All in favor of the motion on the floor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Get with Jay and
Okay. To get it.
next we come to item 19, a request for approval of the annexation of Prairie Acres Mobile Home Estates. Ms. Sarah Hazel, Long Range Planner 3, Rapid City, South Dakota. Hazel.
Good morning.
Is it Hansel?
Yes, Sarah Hansel, Long Range
Oh.
Planning Department,
Did I
City
miss
Rapid
the
City.
N? Oh, I did. Sorry.
Problem. Item 19 on the agenda today is a request to approve the city's annexation of 21 acres of property, which includes the Prairie Acres Mobile Home Park and the adjacent right-of-way. It's located north of Seeger Drive between 143rd Avenue and Dias Avenue, and it is contiguous to the Rapid City limits. This annexation is in a little bit of an unusual situation. As you know, there are two types of annexation: voluntary, where an applicant or property owner petitions the city and they collect signatures. There's also an involuntary annexation process, which is generally when the city is going to acquire property without the voters and property owner signatures. In this case, we're using the involuntary annexation process. However, this is a voluntary annexation. The property owner attempted to acquire enough signatures to meet the state law requirements for a petition, but because of the number of registered voters who have either moved away or have become deceased, they were unable to meet that statutory requirement. So they are asking the city to annex the property. The city is moving forward with an involuntary annexation with the consent of the property owner. And per state law, when property is unplatted and involuntarily annexed, the Pennington County Board of Commissioners must approve this. So we're here today to ask for that approval.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah. Is there anybody from the public who'd like to speak on behalf of this annexation for Prairie Acres? Commission have any comment?
Chairman,
Ms. Hadcock?
so approximately how many people are in that trailer court?
There are about 67 mobile home sites.
And then how many signed for voluntary?
Gosh, that was about 2 years ago that they went to get those. This process has been in play for quite a while. They were, Deb, I couldn't give you a confident estimate. They were maybe 50%. I'd have to double check though.
Okay. Sarah, for me, or Ms. Hansel, it's hard for me to say that we want to involuntary annex people unless, that most of them want to move in or be part of the city annexation. And then the owner just deciding on his own because he can't get enough signatures that he's going to do it anyway. I mean, that's what it looks like. Is there something that I'm missing there, Ms. Hansel?
Sure. So of the property owners who are living there today, they did have a majority. I believe it was more than 75% who are there currently. The property owner has been working with the city on connection to infrastructure. So the city is wanting this property to annex in because of the connections that they have to the sewer infrastructure. So it's not really a matter of the people who are living there today that don't want to annex. It's a matter of registered voters who are on a list they're unable to reach.
Ms. Hadcock. Just for, I don't mean to interrupt
Oh,
you.
go ahead, sir.
I used to live out there, so I understand the infrastructure problems. You know, they were currently on a well. They just redid Seeger Drive with, what is it, 4-lane, 3-lane, all the way through Seeger Drive, and it really improved the area. It only makes sense for, then if they could hook up to the sewer, we could do away with the pond and some of those other things. I think more, it's more to get the utilities hooked up than it is anything else.
Correct.
And if I remember some of the information, you guys have worked with them as far as getting the code violations up to.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
One more question. Is there anything this annexation is gonna do and force these guys to do anything different than they're doing? Do they have to hook up because they're within, what, is it 250 feet or 450 feet? Do they have to hook up?
Through an agreement with the city, they are currently connected to the sewer. They have the option of connecting to the water in the future, and the city could require that. At this time, they're using a private water system. And then when they are annexed, they would need to come into compliance with city maintenance codes, and they will need to receive a permit from the city to operate. There's a mobile home operating license, and our fire department has indicated that they have documented that they will be able to obtain that license that they need to operate.
Does it have a list of what they have to do in order to comply in this packet? I didn't see that.
That's something that the fire department has been working with them on. I don't have the specifics on what those requirements are.
So would that requirement be the property owner or the people that live out there for bringing it up to code?
The property owner has been asking for certain elements of siding or skirting. They've been asking the residents to make those improvements, and they've gotten a lot of improvements over the last several months. Other aspects the property owner would be responsible for.
Okay, for water hookup and different things would be their responsibility. And you said 75% of the people living out there agreed to all that? Or do they know what they are agreeing to?
That was probably 2 years ago that they attempted to get those signatures, so I don't have a current number on what that would be. It became obvious that so many of the people who are on the list of registered voters for that address no longer live there. So it's essentially impossible for them to get 75% of the signatures they need.
And you had a public meeting out there and there was buy-in?
We did not have a public meeting.
I would think you'd have a public meeting to inform people that you're gonna change their infrastructure, you're gonna change their codes and their basically, what if a lot of them are violating and can't afford to change into city codes? That's my worry. I mean, I think it needs to be done, but my bottom line here is I think there needs to be a public meeting out there before I agree to it.
I'll touch back on this a little bit. I understand where Ms. Hadcock's coming from, but I think this is a mobile home court that, in the annexation area, it's Prairie Acres.
Correct.
Correct. And so the notice that she's referring to would be sent out during the rental agreements and so forth. And as far as the sewer and stuff would be the landowner's responsibility as far, the possibility is that their rent could go up if they don't get annexed in.
I think that is possible. The sewer, because of the sewer connection, the city can hold them to a higher sewer rate, which, if that were to happen in the future, would most likely get passed on to the tenants. So being within the city limits is probably is the best case outcome for those rates to stay similar to or the same as what they are now.
Chairman?
Ms. Hadcock.
I think it's pretty simple to have a public meeting and tell them what they're in for, is the bottom line when you annex in, what all that means to me. I would appreciate if the city, instead of the property owner, come in and say, well, we just annexed you in, these are the things we have to get done here, otherwise, this isn't gonna work for us anymore. I would rather have you guys go and have a public meeting, say, we're gonna hook up to sewer, your option is to hook up to water, the codes for mobile homes or what you have out there, because your codes are a lot different for your code enforcement. I mean, you have a lot of different things than the county has that people should know about before they annex in, and you might have a whole different rejection of what's going on out there, depending on the costs and what's happening next. Do I believe water and sewer should be hooked up? Instead of having septic tanks or holding ponds, I definitely do. But bottom line is if you annex me and I would like to know all the options and I'd like a public meeting, and if 4 show up, then that shows you, you know, maybe they don't really care. But if 20 show up and say, okay, this is what's happening, they might come to us and say, don't annex us in, this is what it's going to cost us. And maybe the property owner might do it to them anyway, but at least they know what's going on before all this happens to them.
Do you think that correspondence sent through the mail would be an effective tool to get the same level of information out? A lot of these people, I know with public meetings, it's difficult to get attendance. I'm wondering if something in written fashion might be more effective.
Ms. Ansel, if you put out that you're thinking about annexing in this property to the owners and put that big enough, and you'd like to have a public meeting on that so they know what's going on and what that entails, I think you'll get a lot more people attending and maybe showing up for what could be an annexation for them.
So what kind of input would you be looking for from this meeting?
I guess the input for me is that you just say, we're going to annex you in, and, you know, your owner of your property would like this, and you already know if, have a chart, and this is what happens with code enforcement for these trailers, if that's going to affect them. The sewer, if it's hooking it up, that's going to affect them. The water, if they want to be hooked up, or if it's going to be mandatory they get hooked up. What else? Do you have codes on trailers? Do you have codes? Is there water, sewer, gutters, different things that are hooked up different? Are your pipes going to be different? Once they change that water sewer, are they going to be mandatory to hook up and pay for themselves to that hookup that you put? I have to know, I don't know exactly how where you're putting the water and sewer, but I just remember this when we did out in the valley, and people wanted to know ahead of time. And like I said, if 2 show up, then that says something. But if you put annexation, voluntary annexation, or involuntary annexation in the front and what that means to people, I think that's a huge difference.
I will just clarify that the property owners are already connected to the city sewer system.
Yes, sir.
And then it would be the property owners who would take on that connection. It wouldn't be an individual lot by lot connection to the water in the future. It would be by the city.
But each lot would be required, Ms. Hansel, to obey the law of code enforcement and other things that you would change.
There's quite a few elements of the zoning code that would come in as legal non-conforming. So this property was developed in the county, which, as you mentioned, may have different standards from the city. So it'll come in as legal non-conforming. And then what will be looked at in the future would be changes. If an additional unit were added to the park, or if the park were to expand, then that's when the city would start looking at more of whether conditional use permits and more of that. But if it were to annex now, everything would come in as legal non-conforming.
Right, and we have no building codes or anything like that, and you guys do. So, like I said, that's going to be a whole new change for people that might have, came and got a permit and not have to get inspections and different things when they change stuff. So I just think it's fair to make sure, even if he involuntary does it, that they're in the know of what's happening next to them.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Buskard.
I want to make a motion to approve the annexation of Prairie Acres Mobile Home Park by the city of Rapid City.
Second. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Any from the public? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Oh.
Motion's tied, so it goes to the next meeting. Am I correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we go to, I need a motion to go into executive sessions per SDCL 1-25-2, contractual pending litigation, 1-25-2, 3.
So move.
Been moved.
Second.
Seconded to go into executive session. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
I believe you have to give a little more information, on going into executive session. Whatever you can tell us about what you.
Contractual pending litigation per SDCL 125-23.
You got anything else you can tell them?
Contractual.
Jay, you got
Jay.
something you can share?
Let's see.
I don't know if you have to say more, but it's fine to say with regard to the bid authorization or the bid award regarding the jail expansion and remodel project. That's fine.
Yeah, the remodel project and contractual. Does that help? That's a little more than before. Motion made to come out of executive session by Busker, seconded by DeSanto. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Looking for
21A, bid award recommendation, is that where you're at?
Correct.
yes. Oh,
Good morning, Mike Cool, Buildings and Grounds. At the last commission meeting, we opened bids for the Pennington County Jail Expansion Remodel Project. We received 3 bids for that project. All 3 bids, even considering alternates, exceed the final estimate on the project. And based with that understanding, it is our recommendation that the commission reject all bids and we go back and rescope the project in for a rebid. That would be my motion.
Second.
move to reject all bids for the jail expansion and remodel project due to budget exceedance made by DeSanto, seconded by Hadcock. Any discussion from the public and the board? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Make a motion to go back into executive session.
Jay's gonna.
Under contractual matters regarding SDCL 125-2, subpart 3, Holly is subpart 3, the one that speaks specifically to contractual matters.
That's what it says in mine.
Yes.
Okay. With regard to the, more specifically with regard to the, I can find it.
Want that?
Here we go. The aggregate stockpile project regarding the Kerstead pit.
Okay, so motions to go into, nobody's made,
I made the
or did you?
That'd be my motion.
Motion made by DeSanto, second by Hadcock to go into executive session for SDLCL 1-2523 concerning the mining pit.
The aggregate stockpile project involving the Kerstead pit.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Take 10 minutes.
Okay, is there a motion to come out of executive session?
So moved.
Moved by DeSanto, second by Busker. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries. PJ, items from planning and zoning.
PJ Conover, Director of Planning Department. Item 22 is items from Planning and Zoning, the consent agenda right now. The Board of Commissioners uses a consent agenda to act on non-controversial and routine planning and zoning items quickly. The consent agenda is acted upon by one motion and vote of the board. Items may be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda at the request of a board member or a citizen. The consent agenda for planning and zoning contains the following item. Item A, minor plat 1823 for Dan Wharton, and approval's been recommended. The end.
Is
I
is
make a
there any-
motion to approve the consent agenda.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Is there anybody from the public who'd like to comment on that? None? Any from the commission? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Now we come to regular agenda items. Cassie.
Hi, Cassie Bolstead, Assistant Planning Director. The first item on the regular agenda is item B. This is a request to refund penalty fees by Rob Livingston. So to give you guys a little history of why there's a penalty fee involved in this situation, in July of this year, our office opened an ordinance violation upon verification that there was a vacation home rental being operated on one of the properties in the reserve at Remington Ranch, which is not an allowed use within the PUD. Staff did speak with the property owner, Paul Sapinski, and the agent, Rob Livingston, to discuss what was required to bring the property into compliance per our zoning ordinance. If work is done for which a plan unit development is required, which they need a plan unit development amendment to allow this use, then there is a penalty fee involved, which is a doubled application fee plus a $500 penalty fee. So on August 8th, Rob Livingston did apply for the major plan unit development amendment. And at that time, he paid a $900 penalty fee in accordance with our zoning ordinance. So he is requesting that the penalty fees totaling $900 be refunded. He is here if you have questions for him.
Thank you, Cassie. Mr. Livingston, are you here?
Thank you. Just a little history on this. The Sapinskis in January of 17 went down to the Registry of Deeds, got their covenants, read through everything, and there was nothing there. They couldn't do a vacation home. They did go get a South Dakota Health Department license at that time, or sometime in March, I should say, not right in January. They did talk to the Planning Commission, some there, and asked if it was available or allowable in a PUD. At that time, it was just assumed it was, because it is right next to another PUD that is allowed to it. And so they started renting it in July of 17. So June of 18, the 13th of June to be exact, Mr. Cutler, a neighbor, came down and told him that it was not allowed in that PUD. At that time, a week later, they contacted me and asked me if I would help them amend it. In the meantime, beginning of July, somewhere July 24th, actually, they got a letter from the county saying it wasn't. At that time, before that time, they were already making the application for it. They had it notarized actually on June 20th of last year, the application and everything. And then they went ahead and paid the fees and are going to go through the process. So, they tried to do everything by the book and did everything before they were even notified by the county. They started this application fee. At that time, they literally blocked out all the rest of their dates that were available on VRBO so that they couldn't rent it again. They did have some contractual obligations at that time, so they did continue to do about 4 until they had them blocked out. So that's why we're asking if you'd be kind enough to refund our penalty and fee.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Is there anybody else from that area that would like to speak? Any other residents?
The Sapinskis are here, Paul and Kathy are here, but
Oh, Paul and Kathy are here.
they came up from Omaha. Mm-hmm.
And you're okay with him or do you guys have anything to add? You guys, okay.
I have a question.
Mr. Busker.
So how long had they been renting this vacation home?
Since July of 2017.
So they've rented this for a year, and now they want it, and made quite a bit of money on it, and now they want to get back their penalty fee for, how much is the penalty fee?
$900. They rented it under obligation that they thought they were doing right. I mean, they went to the county, they went to the courthouse to get it. They had an attorney review the covenants. They did that in January, and then it was in July, a year and a half, a year, or 6 months later before they did rent it. They were trying to make all the right steps, getting the health department license and doing everything, so they were just blindsided and didn't know, really. I know ignorance of the law
I've
is
heard
no.
my story before. I'm going to tell it once more. I was driving down the street at 35 miles an hour and I thought I was doing right. And the cop told me, no, it's 25, and that cost me $110, even though I assumed I was going in the speed limit.
Well, they did some investigation, but I understand. Ignorance of the law is no excuse.
It looks like, Paul, you need to speak up here at the podium, please. And just need to identify yourself for the record.
Well, I was listening to what the gentleman had to say. Oh, Paul Sapinski. I was just listening to what you had to say, and that makes good sense as well. But, you know, the thing is, we would have done the PUD had we known anything about it in that particular area. And we didn't. So we thought everything for the project had been done correctly. And then where we're located, there is everything around us is already commercial. So we knew nothing. Tell you the truth, I was very much uninformed about the PUD thing because we went down and had the HOA examined and there was no problem there. So that's all.
Sure, thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
So the options we have, the commission has, is to approve or to deny the request for the $900 penalty fees.
Chairman, can I ask?
Ms. Hadcock.
EJ, so can I ask you a question, please? So first, so they had double application fee and then plus 500. So the double application fee was $400?
Do you remember? For a major, yes.
So it's,
Yes, at the time that they submitted their PUD amendment application, they paid a total of $1,370. The normal application fee is $400, so they paid an extra $400 plus the $500 penalty fee.
okay, I guess I was misunderstanding that because I'm like, the whole PUD is $1,370. But no, that whole PUD amendment, the amendment would only cost them $400 if it was done right.
Yeah, if it was done
Plus maintenance.
beforehand, it would have been $470 total with the sign and the mailings.
Basically, they have 500 extra on there is all.
Correct.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Is there a motion to approve or deny?
Motion to keep the fees at, not to refund.
Motions was made to deny the request for the refund of the 900 penalty fees, right?
Yes, sir.
Any further discussion? Motion was made by Hadcock, seconded by Buschrood. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. It was denied, folks. Thanks. Item C.
Good morning, Brittany Molitor, Environmental Planning Supervisor. Item C is a request to not submit engineered road construction plans and to not build to ordinance 14 standards. This request is to waive some of the requirements to construct a driveway across a section line off of Pine Haven Drive. So our request is to waive engineered road construction plans and to waive the requirement to surface the road with 4 inches of crushed gravel in lieu of 6 inches of gravel.
So staff's recommending to waive the requirements of the ordinance 14 as requested and to approve 66 feet of section line, right-of-way access for the legal description as presented.
Yes, I can show you. This is where the section line is. It's off of Pine Haven Drive, and the request for the construction in the road in the section line is the next agenda item.
Yeah.
But we are asking that they waive that since it's just going to be a driveway that's going to access one lot.
So it's crossing the section line.
Correct.
So, Chairman,
Ms. Hadcock.
so if you don't put a driveway or don't do anything with the section line, if someone, are they going to be, the next section going to be isolated? because we didn't put a road and made it public. Do you see what I'm saying?
Sure, and I can talk about this if you'll let me talk about the next agenda item. It is to construct, see where the 13 is, it's for that lot right there to access that lot. Currently, there is an approach off of Highway 16. Staff has been working with this applicant at length about that and looking at different ways to access this lot so they can build on it. And right now, staff had felt that crossing the section line was a safer, better alternative than utilizing an approach off of Highway 16. We did not receive comments from the DOT regarding that approach, so we're not even knowing if that approach would be approved at this time. And it is within the Pine Haven Road District to take access off of Pine Haven Road. That section line on there is kind of misleading. It's actually along the property line there. It kind of looks like it shifted to the west a little bit. But they're just asking to cross that section line to access that lot.
And not build it to standards.
Right, well, they're just asking to not submit road construction plans and to put 4 inches of gravel. They are still gonna have the width requirements and slope requirements. If there are any need for ditches there, the area is relatively flat. So I don't think that there'll be much for ditches. So that's kind of the area of it that would go through. That is the property marker that down there.
You guys recommend approval?
At this time, it's just for a driveway, so we don't see the necessity.
I would.
And the topography isn't such that would require engineered plans.
Thank you, Brittany.
Mr. DeSanto, did you?
I would move for approval.
Second.
Moved by DeSanto, seconded by Hadcock for approval to waive the requirements of the ordinance 14 standards. Do I need to spell that out again?
No.
Sure. It's the request to waive engineered road construction plans and to surface the road with 4 inches of gravel in lieu of 6 inches.
Move 6, okay. Any discussion from the public? Any from the board? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Item D.
Then item D is the request for road construction within a section line right-of-way. It's to improve 30 feet of section line right-of-way to construct a driveway. As you can see, it's just basically crossing the section line. The driveway will access a 21-acre lot that's zoned general agriculture district. It is located in the Pine Haven Road District. The lot does have several billboards on the property to the south along Highway 16. A site visit was performed last week and there was no construction and no disturbance. There is another access to this property off of Highway 16, although that staff feels that this is not ideal, that access off of Pine Haven would be a better alternative. So staff is recommending approval with 8 conditions.
Okay.
That's my motion.
Second.
Moved by Busker, seconded by Hadcock to approve with 8 conditions. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. DeSanto.
Just want to remind these folks, as well as the public in general, when they come to ask for these section line variances, or to be able to use a section line, that section line is still accessible by the public at any time with a vehicle or hiking or hunting or whatever they want to do. So you can't tell them you got to get off my driveway if we approve this, so.
Okay.
Correct.
Motion on the floor is for approval with 8 conditions. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank
Item
you.
E.
All right, item E is a rezone request. This is a request to rezone 9.2 acres from general agriculture to low-density residential and to amend the comprehensive plan as well. The applicant is TDG Real Estate or Mike Gennaro. This request is actually part of a platting process that Mr. Gennaro is going through. Currently, this property exists as 2 mining claims. He is proposing to reconfigure lot lines to have Glendale tract, which would be 5.12 acres, and Hermosa tract, which would be 4.08 acres. So this rezone request is actually to satisfy one of the conditions of the layout plat. The layout plat was approved in July of this year by the Board of Commissioners. So he's requesting to rezone these lots to low-density residential district. The nearest low-density residential current zoning is directly northwest of the subject properties. And the nearest future land use low density is about 0.6 miles northwest of the subject properties. So it does appear that what he's requesting is in harmony with the surrounding zoning. So staff and the Planning Commission recommended approval of rezone 1806 and Comprehensive Plan Amendment 1805.
Any questions from the board?
Motion to approve.
Second?
Moved by Adcock, seconded by DeSanto for approval. Any other discussion from the public? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Item F.
Item F is a request by Pete Lean and Sons to formal action to close section lines per SDCL 3118.3 between sections 17, 18, 19, 20, and 24. They have had ongoing construction permits since 2008 in this area for mining activity. And currently they are mining through section lines. I do have a presentation of that here. Let me see if I can find it so you can see where it is. Yeah, my presentation isn't up there.
I'll go find it.
Okay. It should be in the.
I'll find it.
Okay. And staff has discussed with the applicant at length about public being able to access these areas that are currently being mined in the section lines. And this South Dakota codified law does give provision in the last sentence that says unless it's closed for safety reasons to vehicular traffic. So staff has worked with the applicants and feeling that if the board formally closes those areas, it gives Pete Lean the ability to gate those areas, post no trespassing signs. When the area is reclaimed, they could come back to the board and formally request to open those back up. In addition, we didn't feel that vacating the section lines were appropriate because they access so many different pieces of property that it could create an isolated tract in the future. At this time, Pete Lean owns all of the properties in and around there, but that's not to say that they couldn't sell those properties at any time. And then that wouldn't provide access. In addition, the city's major street plan does have some of those section lines as future development for streets. Also in the past, we have asked that other mining companies actually vacate section lines or prohibit some kind of access to those section lines for safety. So staff feels that this is a better action in this case to actually formally close those section lines to the public at this time until such time that the area is reclaimed and then it can be opened back up.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. DeSanto.
SDCL 31-18-3 refers to vehicular traffic only. And
Keep going, there's a state one. Brittany, do you have the state one? About, I read it in here. Because I read the one that Commissioner DeSanto's talking about.
Right, it just says this section does not prohibit the closing of a section line to vehicular traffic if the highway is unsafe for vehicular traffic.
but nothing having to do with walking traffic, so they can't post no trespassing signs. They can say no travel by vehicle, but I mean, and I would be probably against posting an actual no trespassing sign. No vehicles, that's fine, but I don't like the idea of closing section lines. I don't like it.
Sure. I guess staff has concerns, though, that there are active mining operations going on in this area. There are other regulations through MSHA and OSHA that prohibit, people accessing these areas. So we were trying to work with the applicants to make that known, I guess, or if there's some kind of posting or something like that, that these areas are not safe for people to be walking through.
I don't have a problem with that. Post signs that say it's unsafe. Proceed at your own risk type of thing. Jay, does that leave us liable for anything if we leave the section line open to walking traffic or horses or,
The greatest question of all time. You can be sued for anything nowadays.
Well, I know that.
I think if you according to the term in that statute, if you maybe there could be something, the Pennington County Commission has closed this section line due to dangerous conditions. Leave it at that. If somebody disregards that at their own risk, I guess that's on them. You're trying to assist an ongoing business there that obviously they're coming to you saying, we don't want you or anyone else to risk injury, so we would like you to close this. And I guess it makes sense to put up some kind of sign. And maybe it would help that the Pennington County Commission has formally closed this section line until further notice due to dangerous conditions beyond. Something along those lines, so that you've done about all you can do to assist the public in not being injured.
Chairman.
Can you still be sued for anything you ever do or don't do? That's how our world is today.
Ms. Hadcock.
I believe your concerns are good concerns, Commissioner DeSanto, but I think based on state and federal law, not only our laws, I think it's safe to close the section line when they're blasting and doing things they're doing. And Pennington does, if you look at their areas, they do post many signs in their areas about mining.
Right.
And blasting and things. So I think they would take that responsibility. Plus, it's, like I said, it's state and federal law. They're just doing a safety factor by taking out those section lines for that same reason, so there's no vehicular or animal or people traffic. So it makes sense to vacate them and then open them back up once they're done mining in them, which they do.
I like Jay's idea of putting up a sign that says the Pennington County has closed it due to safety reasons, but I don't like the idea of putting a no trespassing sign up there. I think that.
Is the applicant here? No. Anybody from the applicant? Could we put the caveat on there instead of no trespassing, section line closed? Could you guys come up with something besides the no trespassing?
Yes, I believe that we could come up with something.
Okay, is that okay, acceptable to everybody?
Yeah, that's fine.
I'll move approval on the request for closing the section line 31-18-3 between 17, 18, 19, 20, and 24 Peatline and Sons.
Motion made.
Second.
Seconded by Buschard. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
PJ.
All right. PJ Conover, Director of Planning Department. The next item before you is item G, which is to consider a motion to amend preliminary plat 1744. This was before the Board of Commissioners, and approved on December 19th, 2017 with 18 conditions. Since that time, the applicant has applied for a final plat, which is an administrative procedure, and that was applied for on May 9th, 2018. As staff normally does with final plats, we send out a draft to the applicants just to review before I sign off on them. At that time, there was some question about two of the conditions, or three of the conditions that were about the fire sprinkler system, fire suppression, fire mitigation. So staff has been working with the applicant and the landowners and the landowner to see if we can come to some type of compromise on what would be required. We involved the fire administrator and also one of the fire chiefs from the city of Rapid City who had a crew go out and do tests on the gallons per minute and also the sustainability of 1,000 gallons per minute. And they were both okay with the amount of fire flow that was out in the area. So since the final plat has not been approved at this time, we're coming back with you with asking you to reconsider Plat 1744 with amendments to condition number 1 and condition number 2. These were conditions and verbiage that was offered to us by the applicant and the agent. Our fire administrator has looked at these and has no objection. Their amendments, which would be item 1 and item 2, basically would cover the previously approved conditions 1, 2, and 3. So staff would recommend approval of preliminary plat 1744 with 17 conditions as amended.
That'd be my motion.
Been moved by Hadcock,
Second.
seconded by Busker to approve with amendments. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. DeSanto.
how many lots are out there right now, PJ?
How many lots are out there right now?
Mhm.
I think there's one, two, let's go back here. 5
Only 5?
right now. They're looking to create 10.
How many residences are in the Sunset?
Oh, I'd have to go back and look. I'm sorry, I haven't.
Over 100?
I'd have to go back and look. I'm sorry, I don't know.
Okay. I think there are over 100. I just kind of feel like this is kind of, at this point in time, the size of this neighborhood, I guess you would call it, it might be a good idea for them to just decide to turn it into their own little city. There's a lot of towns or a township or something so that they don't have to keep coming back before us for all these rules and stuff. They can develop their own rules, and that way they're not taking up our time to get that done. Anyway, just a suggestion.
Thank you, Mr. DeSanto. Motion on the floor is with approval with the amendments. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries with 1 nay from DeSanto. Okay, just let us get caught up to speed here. Next, we're to item H.
Ready?
BJ.
Item H is Plan Unit Development Review 1603 for Dan and Nancy Evangelisto, Century Homes Crafters LLC, Century Landholders LLC, Summer Crafters LLC et al. To review a plan unit development to allow for specialty resort development to include such uses as vacation home rentals, weddings, receptions, picnics, family reunions, single-family residences, bed and breakfast, storage gift shop, spas, cabanas, bistros, detached accessory structures with living quarters, duplexes, etc. on the subject property. This has been before you several times since 2016. Just some reminders for the commission. We provided you with kind of a timeline of events and all the reviews with the Planning Commission and with the Board of Commissioners. The main item that has always come up is the temporary or permanent status of the current tent that is on the property. There's also some concerns from the neighbors as far as noise, and there's also some current amendments that were passed by the board on May 15th of this year that I know the applicants are looking for you to consider for possible amendments. And those are conditions number 14, 24, and 27. And as always, the very last condition will be changed as well because that has to do with the next review of the item. So unless you have any questions for me, I'll pass it on.
Okay, PJ, what'd you say, 14, 24, and 27?
Correct.
And so I think what I'm gonna do is we'll take up item number 14. We'll talk about that. And we'll move on down to 24 and 27, because I think we've had great discussion on the rest of the stuff.
Yeah.
Correct? Does anybody have a problem with that? Going through 14, 24, 27? And then if there's any changes, vote on the whole thing at the end?
Right.
Okay. So item number 14.
So I can give you a little history on it if you'd like.
Yes, please.
Yep. So item 14 is currently that quiet hours for all lots in the planned unit development, PU 1603, be from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. on Friday and Saturday, and from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. Sunday through Thursday. When this came out of the Planning Commission as a recommendation, it was specifically for lots 3, 4, 10, 11, 12, and 45 with those same time restrictions, but it was for amplified sound. On May 15th, the board changed the condition to what it currently reads now.
Just
I'm
one
letting
second.
him finish.
I know, sir, but just one thing. Can we put the lots up there so we know?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, sir.
Yeah, let me get that.
That way we know what he's talking
Yeah,
about.
that's helpful, Deb. Thanks.
3, 4, 10, 11,
That
12.
one won't have it.
That's pretty much where the tent's at.
Yeah,
Yeah.
43.
But that's, yeah, so that's their history.
Okay.
Including the Bed and breakfast.
And I believe the applicant's asking, their request is that it probably be changed to 13.
So it'd be, I'm pretty sure I can get this, 3, 4, 10, 12, 11, and 45. 45 is the overflow parking.
So it's bed and breakfast and the tent area.
Yeah. And Evangelista, so excuse me if I'm off the wrong. Your request on this one is you'd just like to have the request no amplified sound. Before I ask for a motion, I'd just like to have your,
Good morning, Dan Evangelisto. Yeah, that is correct. I believe the condition before this one spells out the codified law that pertains to nuisance as far as noise and actions, which blankets the entire PUD. And so we were just concerned about the amplified sound during events, which would pertain just to those specific lots.
okay. Dan, I think we've heard quite a bit on this, so I'm gonna ask for a motion either to change it or not, or leave as is.
I would move to change it that there be no amplified sound on lots 3, 4, 10, 11, 12, and 45 in the Plan Unit Development PU 16-03 from 11 p.m. to 7 p.m. on Friday and Saturday, and 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. Sunday through Thursday.
Is there a second? Motion dies for lack of second. Now, any more further comments before I make a comment?
Wait.
My only comment is I think there were some compromises made with this, and I think something like this can come back and change. So I'd say not sweat the small stuff at this point and move forward as is, because I think there was some good research on this, so I'm willing to make a motion to leave as is.
Second.
On item 14. So the motion's been made to leave condition 14 as is, moved and seconded. Did you want to speak one more time, Dan? Or if not, I'd look for approval. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
1 no. So item 14 is stay as is. Now we go to item 24.
So item 24 was developed from the fire administrator after a couple visits out to the event site. This is to provide some added safety measures for the users of the tent when it is being used for weddings or events or reunions and items like that. So it's a very long condition because it's a accumulation of a whole memo of his. The applicants are asking to specifically state in the beginning of the condition that this is for lots 10, 11, and 12, which is the event site that the tent is currently on. Staff has no objections to that and would recommend that it read, that the beginning of the condition should be changed to that for structures located on lots 10, 11, and 12, a portable, and then go into the existing condition.
That would be my motion.
Second.
Moved and seconded, moved by DeSanto, seconded by Hadcock to change that, as you stated. I don't want to go through. Carrie, you okay with that?
I'll get it.
You'll get it?
BJ later.
Okay.
Thank you, though.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. That's to change item 24. And I'll remind, I see some other people out in the public that after we go through these amendments, we'll vote on it as a whole. Okay. Next, we come to item 27.
Item 27 is the condition where it currently says temporary tent towards the third line from the bottom. That was changed by the commission from permanent tent, I believe, in May 15th of this year. So.
Any discussion?
I would make a motion to put in permanent tent because of the amount of damage and that it would cause taking that thing down, putting it back up again, and the cost, and it's kind of against what the whole purpose of the thing was for in the first place.
Okay. Any further discussion?
Is that a motion?
That's a motion. Make it permanent tent.
Motion dies for lack of second. Further discussion. I'm going to give Dan a moment to speak.
We had, when Commissioner Hadcock and the fire administrator came out earlier this summer, we had talked about doing wooden walls around it. And PJ had some suggestions on that too. And everybody was in favor at the fire administrator, planning department. We're all in favor of doing that as kind of a compromise. And it's always been our position that there is not a tent ordinance, nor is there any building codes that we meet the requirements for a building permit. So we're trying to do a wood frame structure with a vinyl top structured system, engineered structure roof system on it.
Okay. Dan, I guess my thoughts on this, commissioners, is when we first started talking about this, is I thought, the white canvas top kind of stuck out in the area, and I didn't think it was right. After further review on the project, it was always supposed to be temporary, but I think at some point, the building permits were allowed. I would like to see this structure, and I think there was some discussion. I'd rather see it with a wooden roof type system, and how we get there, I don't know. I mean, there's been some suggestions of things thrown around of how should we allow the walls in between such and such time, and then the roof comes later on. That's how I'd like to see it. I'd like to see this become a structure, not a permanent tent. It would be my goal. I'm trying to feel out what the rest of the commission is thinking on this before I move any more forward. But Dan, is that your thoughts? You've talked about putting up the 2x6 walls, insulating it, and then eventually moving up to removing the tent and putting a regular roof on the structure that would blend in. I think I've seen somebody stand up.
That if the events go as well as we hope and we generate some revenue from this thing, that would be our plan in the future. But I mean, if things don't pencil out, then probably not. But I think they will, and I think that's the direction we're going.
Okay. Mike, looks like you're thinking.
Yeah, Mike Wheeler, representing the Evangelistos and their entities with regards to this. Yeah, looking at it, I guess first of all, to note that again, they haven't violated any conditions in the PUD. They haven't violated any ordinances or statutes. So, but looking at this going forward, then it seems to me, it's more of an aesthetic type of concern. And so I would request that the commission work with the Evangelistos on that to address it in that manner. Maybe look at it not so much as a permanent tent, as more of an event structure, and how we can work to get something set up that would be acceptable, I guess. Understanding that we believe the tent had already been approved as permanent, and that, so anyway, that's just following up with what Dan had requested.
Thanks, Mike. Is there any further discussion?
Mr. Chair.
Ms. DeSanto, then Deb.
Many roofs that you put on a structure are guaranteed, warranted, figured they're going to last 25 years. That's what normally the warranty. Now they're coming up with some shingles that last longer than that, and permanent roofs and that kind of stuff. Whereas at the same situation, this tent structure and material is, I believe, also guaranteed for 25 years. No different than a roof. If it's aesthetics only that they're looking for, that they don't want the white roof, would it be advisable to paint it green or brown would it damage the integrity of the roof? I believe it probably would. I don't think you're adding additional weight and possibly, if once that green starts to fade, I think it changes probably it would even void the warranty of the fabric of the tent, would be my guess. But that's what I'm asking is, what's the difference between having a permanent roof on there and this roof that's got a warranty that it's not going to tear, leak, whatever for 25 years? And if I'm correct, and I've read quite a bit on this when we very first started talking about it, I went to the website where they purchased the material for this tent. It almost sounds to me like the actual fabric is more fire resistant than a regular roof, unless you're talking than any roof. I mean, so it's not a safety situation. It's not a whether or not it's going to last situation. It just sounds like it's primarily that it's white.
Ms. Hadcock?
Just a couple of things. Doesn't that make this a commercial property? Is it already zoned commercial, or can you have a PUD with a commercial tent or building if they make it permanent? Basically, it wouldn't be used for, it's part of the bed and breakfast, right? And you make another structure. So basically, you're turning this district, this area, into a commercial district with what, lot 3, 4?
This is 10, 11, and 12, I believe. It's the PUD with those allowed uses. And the specialty resort is one of the allowed uses in the PUD, but mainly for 3, 4, 10, 11, 12, and 45.
And putting a temporary tent into a commercial tent would be a use in the PUD. Because
I'm getting stuck on the word commercial.
Because you're putting a tent into a permanent structure, it's going to be for a commercial use.
Even if it's temporary, I think the use would be the same.
Okay. They're saying permanent, not temporary.
Right, I think either way, the use is the use.
Okay.
Yeah.
Couple of things. It was said in 16 that this was said to be a permanent tent. I do have the transcript on here, and it was never said to be permanent. Buscrude had said it. We started with PJ saying, usually on a temporary building permit, we would just write in the time frame. It's all usually not a couple of months. Buscrude goes into, so I'm not real crazy, but giving a permanent permit for a tent that's not permanent. The reason wasn't because of the wind. The reason was because of aesthetics. I had said that, and I had said that at the last meeting. Bottom line, it was a complaint basis. And through this whole conversation in 16 that was recorded, it's never talking about a permanent tent, sir. So I believe it should stay temporary. I don't believe it should stay permanent. They knew when they put this tent up, it was temporary. They knew when they constructed it, it would be temporary. They wanted permanent from the beginning. But the only time it was ever changed to permanent is in the Planning Commission. And that was the last meeting, and then we changed it back to temporary. So my issue here is that you already had residents before the tent, and residents are right next to the tent. And basically it'd be, if you make it commercial or permanent tent, that gives you the right to have and do what you want on that property, which is good in one sense, but who was there first? So what about the restrictions on people that live there? I mean, they were there first, and now we're saying, let's go ahead and make this permanent. Let's put some 4 walls on it and add it to the bed and breakfast, and you people, you'll be okay. Even in the city, we don't put commercial right next to residential unless the residents are in agreement with that. Why would we do it in the county?
There's a process for that, Commissioner Hadcock. It's the planned unit development process that the commission is now considering to allow for this type of a use pursuant to the zoning ordinances that have been adopted by this county.
Right, sir,
So
a
it's not-
PUD. A PUD, sir, with a temporary tent was what we agreed when we started this. We never agreed to turn it into permanent so the neighbors would have peace and quiet and they could use it for their use, but not all year round, which made sense to even me. I was in agreement with that. If you look in this, actually, I'm the one that made the motion, but I said it was on a complaint basis, but I never said permanent. And the commission never said permanent. Now you're saying that you can have a 24-hour, 12-month, whenever we want party, and the neighbors can live with that.
Mr. Mike.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. We could argue back and forth on that. The fact of the matter is that the second reading of the ordinance specifically says permanent tent. My understanding is that the review on the tent was to see how it weathered, how it withstood the weather. And I guess it strains credulity to me to suggest that the evangelistos would have gone out there and spent as much money as they did on this, not believing that it had been approved as a permanent tent, when that is actually specifically set forth in the second reading of the ordinance. That's all I'm reading, Commissioner Hadcock. I mean, it says permanent tent, it's right there, so.
Okay, sir, it says right here, when we put it up, can you put something, PJ, and this is from me, that this for a year can do a trial basis if they don't have complaints on this tent being an issue, because if you've seen in it adding to the ambiance, if this is not taken away from the area, putting a junky tent up or anything, meaning if there isn't complaints. So that was said in 16, 2 years ago, sir, and the agreement was for a year, and then it came back to us as a temporary. It said it the whole way through on here. So you told us last time, you guys said it was permanent. And I don't want to go back and forth, but the bottom line, this was never permanent until 2015 or 2018 when the Planning Commission changed it. I'm not disagreeing that the evangelistos wanted permanent the whole way through, sir, but this commission never agreed to permanent at any time.
Okay.
Now, where we go from there, I'm in agreement with Lloyd and you and everybody else, but I was trying to say last time we never agreed with it. So the bottom line is where do we go from here? It's got to be something that's going to work for the neighbors as well as the evangelistos, not just the evangelistos for me.
Mr. Terry.
I'd like to ask one question.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I think we're at a point where we need to find, PJ, could you help me out with, I'd like to give an option for a motion with timelines for walls.
Okay.
You know what I'm talking about. I think I've had conversations. I want to give two options. We either do one or the other. We vote one up, one down, and then vote on everything.
So a possible motion for the current tent turning the sides into solid walls with the roof?
And
keeping the membrane on top?
Yeah.
Okay. It's kind of lengthy, so I can read it.
Yeah, I know. That's why I'd like.
Okay. Okay, so first thing is that we'll take the word 10 out because the county doesn't have any building codes. So this type of hybrid construction is going to be solid wooden sides, which would actually increase the flammability of the structure because now you have wood,
That's right.
not just fabric. And changing that to event structure. I believe their attorneys used that term earlier today, so that you're going to hear that in here.
Well, you
So
know,
just-
I appreciate Mr. Wheeler and his legalese, but, you know, you can call it what you want to. It's a tent. And you can call a drug dealer an unlicensed pharmacist if you want, but they're all the same.
Yep.
Yeah.
We're actually using that same word, same phrase, so. Okay, that the event structure referred to in condition 27 shall be for the existing 40 by 100 event area, currently covered by the 40 by 100 temporary membrane that would be used as open space and to cover the existing kitchen and bathroom. So basically defining the area that's currently being used. So that's what we're talking about. The event structure shall be made of 6-inch thick insulated stick-built sides which tie into the existing stick-built kitchen and bathroom structure. A temporary membrane roof shall be permitted to remain until, and then we'd need to set a timeline in there, and shall be replaced with a stick-built roof so that no temporary membrane is to be used for the event structure. The landowner shall apply for a building permit to replace the current tent walls with 6-inch thick stick-built insulated walls prior to October 1st, 2018. This work shall be completed prior to the expiration of the building permit, which shall be December 31st, 2019. That's just for the walls, and then that would be the time frame for the building permit. Usually they're 2 years, but I know there was some discussion with Dan when he came up with this idea that he could get the walls up within a few months, but we were giving him a little over a year to do it. And then some timeline for the temporary
The
membrane.
reason I want to bring this up as an option for the commission. And then if that was approved, say you gave it 3 years,
For the roof?
the walls, and then 1 year for the walls,
1.5.
and then you'd go, yeah, maybe 3 for the roof.
Staff wouldn't have an objection to that.
No. Would you say 3 years for the roof? Or, I would say within 5.
Excuse me. Yep. Nancy Evangelisto. I'm a little concerned about, would you take your roof off of your structure in 5 years if you have a 25-year very viable, good
I'm
product?
just asking for an option right now.
So I'm looking
That's-
at, as long as we have yearly inspections on it, making sure it's in good condition and there's no tears or damage to it, that we be able to use it for the life as long as it's good.
Okay.
As far as putting a wood structure, if we sell, what happens if we sell? And then the new owners would have to abide by this. So that's the only concern that we have.
I understand your concerns, and I'm trying to find compromise between the commission, and this is the way I'm going about it.
So if we go 15 years on it, a minimum of 10 years.
I wouldn't go for that. My option would be 5. If the commission goes with that, or the other processes, we could leave the wording as is and the amendments that we have and vote on it as a whole. That is an option I think the commission has.
Mr. Chair.
Mr.
In that option that you just mentioned, when do we dictate that they shut down for the whatever number of months that they need to shut down because they got to take their tent down?
That's not our problem.
Well, we got to tell them when they got to take it down. That
You
is
have
our
a
problem.
you have a 5-year period that you could figure it out. You built a kitchen within that period of time, and you're building walls in between that
So
time.
you're saying they'll be able to run their operation all year round for that 5-year period of time. Then after that 5-year period of time, if they haven't put a roof on it, they're done.
And we don't approve the permits, or, I'm trying to find options
I
here.
know you are. I understand.
I mean, we could, I think at this point,
Can we hear from the neighbors?
well, we're just trying to work on numbers, trying to get through so we can vote on something as a whole. If we can't get through this, then we're not gonna get through the whole thing.
Well, we got 14
So-
and 24. All we need is 27, sir.
I know, we gotta get through 27, that's the bigger hangup. So that's why I wanna get that on there first, then they know what they're voting on, or gonna come up and discuss on. Otherwise, we're just going around it. Do you guys agree with me?
Can we get clarification as to what it is again that you're proposing?
He just read this to where within a year, you'd put up the walls.
Wooden walls, correct?
And then the second part of the condition would be, like, say, within 5 years, you'd add the wooden roof. And you just got done telling me,
Okay, I understand. I
Okay.
was not understanding what you're saying.
so that's where we're at with that part of the motion. Or we could just leave it as is and move on.
Okay.
Which would be a temporary, not changing the wording, not doing anything else. A motion's been made to make it permanent, state it permanent, but it died for lack of second. So that's why I'm giving other options as to where to go with this.
So Chairman,
Ms. Hadcock?
What was it when we first started, when we approved this as a temporary tent, how many months was it up before we decided that we'd make it or not permanent, but try it for year round? How many months was this up before then as a temporary tent? PJ, before all this started and we decided to do a year?
It was less than a year, because I didn't apply for the building permit right away. I think maybe 4, 5, 6 months, maybe. And then they had to go out of town for a family issue, which they asked for an earlier review than, it was supposed to be reviewed in February 2018. They wanted a review earlier than that. It ended up actually getting reviewed at or after February 18th, 2018.
So what I'm asking, PJ, is before we decided that we'd do the trial for a year, what was the conditions on the tent for temporary? How many months did we have it up before we did the trial?
I don't think.
Or did we leave it, did we
Or
say?
none. There were none. There was a conditional use, but the original conditional use permit for this, again, this isn't the original tent from 8 years ago when it was up, but the original conditional use permit for this was the tent was only to be up on an as-needed basis and not permanent. I can't remember the exact words. But since then, things have changed. They developed the area and they're looking to do a permanent structure.
So at any time, did we tell them that we were going to take this tent down or that they needed to take it down? Or did we decide as a planning department and a commission that that was okay, that they put up a $40,000 tent that they couldn't take down?
So they had a tent that was temporary. The temporary tent came up and came down, so the staff had no issues with that because they were meeting the conditions. Staff approved the temporary building permit after the board approved it for this tent, with the conditions that the board had set that it would be up for a period of time for review after looking at it, in all the different seasons.
Okay.
And that expiration was August 8th of this year, last month.
So can you tell me if we can take this tent down at this point, because you have the poles in the tent? So what would be the option, because you can't take that tent down? You have to take the whole tent down because the tent is built into the bathroom and the kitchen. So with poles, so at this point, that tent isn't coming down no matter what. I mean, you'd have to take the top of the tent and everything down and you just have a permanent kitchen and bathroom, but the poles are connected to it. So I'm telling this commission, that isn't going to be a temporary tent no matter what, because they can't take that down. So are we going to allow them to use that tent all year round? Or are we going to use it for 6 months? Or are we going to say, oh, they just put it up temporary or permanent for all year round, no matter what? Because again, that tent isn't coming down. They made it permanent. Our decision was temporary, but they made it permanent. So the decision here today is, do we take that tent, have them take the rest of that tent down and then put a temporary one up around the bathroom and the kitchen, like we said? Or do we leave this tent up, condition it for 6 months? Or do we just take this tent and say, you're fine, keep doing it all year round? Does that make sense? Because they can do it as is. You don't have to make that a permanent structure because it already is. Is it, if you want aesthetically to put some brown ceiling on it and some brown roof and walls to make it look more aesthetically pleasing, that's the only thing you're going to change on this tent, unless you make them take it down. What's the options? I think I just told you.
Mr. Chair.
You done, Ms. Hadcock? Or do you have a motion?
I don't know what you'd do with it, sir.
Okay, Mr. DeSanto.
I want to ask the Evangelistos, can the tent be taken down?
The tent can absolutely be taken down. The bathroom and the kitchens have a separate building permit that's been approved. The bathrooms and the kitchen will stay regardless.
If you took the tent down, you would have to somehow or another protect the structure of the bathroom and the kitchen because it's got a flat roof right now.
We would have to put the exterior doors on the part that goes into the event tent.
Yeah.
We would have to change and put exterior rated doors.
Okay.
And the tent membrane would stay on over the kitchen and the bathrooms.
Just the kitchen and the bathroom.
Correct.
Okay.
Because there was no objected, there was nothing in the building codes that said we couldn't have a membrane.
Right.
My thoughts on this, commissioners, is the only reason why I thought about the permanent walls on the side and moving forward with that direction is, number one, is to keep people in business. 385 is filled with that type of businesses that are going on there, and I don't think it was out of line. To get it to the point to where it's permanent, taxed as permanent, reduces the noise, that type of thing, I think that step of putting the walls in and changing the roof out is the way to go. I think it was, personally, that big of a tent was probably a bad investment for that area. White, I've always been against that, the color of it, not the events, not what you do there, but that it just didn't fit in that location as it sets. That's why I did some research and asked staff to come up with an alternative to where we could go with this. And I think they have one motion, but again, I understand you're saying it's based on costs. You wanted 10, 15 years, and I'm saying 5.
And
The residents,
that's something that we can look at.
I'm saying the residents out there probably want 5. They want it done within a period of time. And I personally think if it was enclosed, it's no different from what's across the street, and I think things could probably be worked out a little bit better that route myself. But I'm not quite sure I would make that motion, but there's only 4 of us here, and we may be 2-2. I don't know. But, I mean, then we're right back to the same point.
Chairman,
Ms. Hadcock.
if we did it permanent, and if I agreed to permanent, I don't say 5 years. I say if you want permanent, you have to make it a structure. That wasn't our fault that you put a temporary, or you put a $40,000 tent up there and then wanted it to become permanent. If you want permanent, it sounds like even the neighbors, they want a structure as well, and I think that makes sense. And if it's not feasible to do that because of your events, then take it down and use it as a temporary tent for 6 months. That's only fair.
I suggest 5 because I think it's fair by the time you do the walls and as things go further. I know that's a big structure, and I think it's
5 years to put a structure in
to put a roof on, not to enclose the walls. That'd have to be done within a year. But then to come up with the process of the roofing and so forth, I think by the time you get into this year, I think 5 is a pretty fair
But Chairman, here's the issue.
That's my thoughts on it.
This paper, this is 2 years of changes and changes and changes. 2 years, $900 that our staff has put into this book. And now we're going to say that these people are going to follow the rules this time and not have any changes and not do anything they're not supposed to do, and then come back and ask us again for something different.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. DeSanto.
I'm going to have to kind of put a stop to this because we've been told multiple times by PJ that they have never broken a code.
Thank you.
They have never broken the rules, not once. And to be continually accusing them of breaking the rules is unfair to them. And so I don't like listening to that, and I don't think it's proper. My next point is there's 150 or more pole buildings out there with white roofs on them, all over the place in the Black Hills. I could drive you to 10 of them probably in 25 minutes. Pole barns with white roofs. They might be steel roofs, but they're white. And they don't withstand the weather or anything any better than supposedly this membrane, according to the manufacturer, withstands it. When we very first talked about agreeing to allow them to keep it up year-round, it was my understanding anyway, I sat both on the Planning Commission at that point in time and then and voted on it in the Board of Commissioners. It was my understanding that the only thing that we were asking them to make sure of is that it withstood the weather. I don't remember making any caveats about aesthetics or anything like that when it came to, we're gonna have you do this test phase where it stays up for a year and see how it withstands the snow load, hail, fire if there was one, that kind of stuff. So I have a really difficult time with understanding why you can drive less than 10 minutes up the road and there's a giant pole barn on the left-hand side of the road, if I remember correctly. It's got a white roof on it. Nobody forced them to paint the roof brown or green or purple or whatever. So that's my issue, and I guess I'm done.
Chairman, point of order, please.
Please state point of order, clarify what your point of order is.
The Evangelistos have been fined for doing
That's not-
vacation home rental. Commissioner DeSanto said they have been in no violation and PJ has found nothing. That is not true. Thank you.
Okay.
The neighbors can verify it if you'd like. Thank you. They have been in violations.
Mr.
Recorded with the state.
Mr.
You know,
Busker.
I think I said it last time. I'm getting tired of hearing this thing time after time. Let's make a decision and get it over with for their benefit and for ours.
Yeah.
And for PJ's. So we don't have to keep copying this many files every meeting and
still will.
wasting hundreds of dollars of paper. I mean, let's, for their benefit too, let's get it over with.
I'm going to make the motion that you commented on, PJ, and I'd put the date in there, 6/23, and that's that the event structure refers condition number 20 shall be existing 40 by 100 event area covered. Do I need to read all that?
I can read it. Do you want the tenant for the roof for how long?
I'd say 5 years, 6/23.
So June. Five years until.
And then they'd have the year to do the walls.
I'm missing you on the 6/23.
From
June
a
23rd?
temporary membrane roof shall be permitted to remain until 6/23.
6 of 2023.
Yeah, 2023, sorry.
Oh, so June 2023. Okay.
And then apply for a building permit for the,
Yeah, if you'd like, I can go through it one more time for
yes,
the record.
please, so everybody's clear on what's going on.
Okay. All right, so this would be a new condition that would be added. Staff's recommendation that it become condition number 28, which would then bump every subsequent condition up one number. So proposed condition number 28, that the event structure referred to in condition 27 shall be for the existing 40-foot by 100-foot event area that is currently covered by the 40 by 100-foot temporary membrane tent and used as open space and covered with the existing kitchen and bathroom, and covers the existing kitchen and bathroom. The event structure shall be made of 6-inch thick insulated stick-built sides, which tie into the existing stick-built kitchen and bathroom structure. The temporary membrane roof shall be permitted to remain until June 2023 and shall be replaced with a stick-built roof so that no temporary membrane is in use for the event structure. The landowner shall apply for the building permit to replace the current tent walls with 6-inch thick stick-built insulated walls prior to October 1st, 2018. This work shall be completed prior to the expiration of the building permit, which shall expire on December 31st, 2019.
That's what I wanted.
Okay.
Any discussion? If not, Ms. Hadcock,
I would say 3 years.
is that a motion?
Yes, amend it.
I don't believe there was, excuse me, I'm sorry. I don't believe there was a second.
There wasn't a
Oh, there wasn't a second on mine, so we don't need to. So you're saying 3. So you're saying 2020, what's the commission? 2 or 3 or 5?
She's shaking her head to no, both of them.
Mr. Chairman,
Mis-
nobody seconded hers.
No, nobody seconded mine yet.
I'll second hers just for the sake of talking about it.
Okay, So the motion is everything that you read, instead of 5 years, she's got it, Ms. Hadcock requested it be 6 of 20.
So that's less than 2 years.
Yeah, I'd say 21, probably, wouldn't it?
3 years, whatever 3 years
Yeah,
is.
whatever 3 years.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr.
I'm gonna vote against this because they have absolutely no intention of doing that, either one of them.
She's shaking her
That
head
is
no.
They've already said that.
She's shaking her
They
head
did- they
no
can't-
the whole time.
And I don't blame them for not doing it. They bought something the last 25 years, and now you're telling them in 2 years, 3 years, you gotta get rid of it? I don't blame them.
That's not what we're saying.
That's not true. We
You're
can
shaking your head at every number we're saying,
No.
Ms. Evangelista.
All right,
I,
let's,
Commissioner Lloyd,
Ms.
LaCroix.
please follow up.
We have invested an extreme amount, not just in the events, but into this community. There are several other owners within this community who have thrown their hands up that are just so frustrated with this whole process. And they have come in, tried to support us, and been shut down and poo-pooed. And we're here saying, we have tried to compromise. Every time we have tried to compromise to the neighbors who are in objection, we get told that we're the ones requesting changes. Well, we're trying to make changes to make this work for everybody. The noise complaints, all of these things have been founded not true. The 5 years, we have lost over 2 years of event business because of the length of these proceedings. We could have had the roof put on. If we continue to have delay, and you want us to commit to 3 years now, how are we supposed to financially recoup that on top of all of the tax increases and all of the other things that have happened financially to put us out of business? And that's the frustration that you're seeing and the head shaking that you're seeing. It's like, we're all business people. I know Commissioner Hadcock has a business. It's just like if I told her she could only run her business, and during the busiest season, she has to shut down. And that's what's happened here. During some of the busiest times, December, we're being told we have to take this tent down, because you cannot take this tent down when the weather is cold. That's why we're saying we'll be happy to put walls in. We'll go with the 5-year, be able to recoup enough to pay for it, to put a roof on in 5 years. I don't think we're being unreasonable here. I think it's a fair compromise.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. DeSanto.
with that being said, if they feel that 5 years is a reasonable compromise, then I would make the motion as exactly the way that you stated it, and PJ has it written down.
Substitute. You're making a
And I'll
substitute.
look for a second.
I'll second.
5 years.
So Chairman,
For 5 years. Anybody, Ms. Hadcock?
so here's the difference between a business person and a person that does it and then asks forgiveness later. At a temporary tent, I would have known it was temporary. I wouldn't have vested that much money in a tent that would cost me $40,000. I'll be up straight. So I am a business person, but I also know investment. So if I knew I was only going to get a temporary tent and I only had it through 6 months, but I wanted permanent, I understood, I would have got it permanent, or would have told this commission that this was going to be a membrane tent that would be hard to take down. Is that okay at this point that this become more permanent? I would have been up straight from the beginning and then said that.
Let's stick to the
So-
motion on the
Call
floor.
for question.
Mr. Chair. I'm sorry.
He called the
He
question.
called, so I can't.
Question's been called. Is there a second? I'll second. No, hold on. We had a motion on the floor. We had a motion.
Voting on the
To vote
substitute.
On the motion.
Substitute motion was as stated, except instead of 3 years, but 5 years.
5 years.
So that's what's on the floor. And question's
5
been
years,
called.
right? The 5-year one.
That's,
Okay.
You didn't have the other side speak though, Lloyd.
No, and I explained that. What's going to happen is after we're going through each item, the 5 items, then afterwards, we're going to vote on the whole thing as a whole. And at that time, we'll take comments. I explained that at the very beginning. So
So right now on the floor is keep the way PJ said it, but with 5 years.
5 years.
DeSanto, and you seconded it.
Okay. Motion, it's been called, question's
I
been
know,
called,
I
so we
just
gotta take vote.
need clarification, but.
So we better take a roll call vote.
Okay. Buskerud?
No.
DeSanto?
Yes.
Hadcock?
No.
LaCroy?
Aye. So 2-2.
I will make a motion now, though. And I will go back to Deb's 3 years. And with the same provisions, and go back to 3 years.
Second.
So
The only reason I'm doing that is so we can get this over with, and I know it's not what they want, and probably, I hope they can swing it.
So September 2021.
Motion's been made and seconded. You guys understand what the motion is? Everybody is? Okay. Roll call vote, please.
Buskerud? DeSanto?
No.
Hadcock?
Aye.
LaCroy?
Aye. Okay. So we've dealt with the three. Now we're gonna go back to the whole thing. Now I'll recognize PJ.
Sorry. So current condition 43 then becomes condition 44.
Okay.
And that's usually the review timeframe. So we'd recommend a review in 2 years. So we just check in halfway, well, a little over halfway.
Good.
And that's keeping in with the pace for other PUDs and CUPs.
Okay, is everybody, do we need a motion on that
Or just incorporate that as,
part of it?
yeah. And it's going to be 44 conditions now.
Very good. And I will make the motion to approve whatever we're trying to approve right now.
So now-
The entire,
So now, oh, sorry, go ahead, Mr.
the
Busker.
entire review, we need a motion to approve
Approve
the
the
review
extent-
with whatever, there was three changes.
The motion could be to approve the extension of Plan Unit Development 1603 with 44 conditions as amended.
That would be the motion.
That's what I said.
I heard that. Second by Deb Hadcock. Now, I'm gonna take public comment on the whole conditions. Did the residents want to speak? They sat through this.
Morning, Commissioners. I'm Peggy Bowser, owner of property up at Custer Trail subdivision, and I'm speaking for myself and for Don Behrens, who is unable to be here this morning because of work, as well as some of the other neighbors who are at work. We would just strongly urge the commission to consider the vote for the event tent, as it sets a precedent and affects the entire Black Hills as well as the entire Pennington County for tents. And then when Mr. DeSanto brought up all these pole barns with white roofs, for example, that's not a commercial business. It's probably for a farmer or a storage barn for somebody that lives out in a rural area. I also think that and I know you've already moved back and forth for 5 years and 3 years and 5 years and 3 years to put this roof on this proposed tent to cover the membrane. But I think that 3 years is even too much. Mr. Evangelisto is a builder, as they made very clear. And I think that putting a roof would not take 3 years. I think they could do that in far less time. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Heidi.
Morning, Commissioners. At least this meeting's a little shorter than the last one. Peggy Gibson from Huron, owner of Lot P, which is directly across Taylor Ranch Road from the property in question here. And I want to thank you for your time, and I want to thank you for paying attention to this issue. We, of course, Dale and I are concerned about our property values, and I have never liked a big white circus tent in a residential area. And Dale and I are business people as well, but we don't make investments based on issues where the rules are the rules. We also own a cabin up on Edelweiss Mountain. We just attended our annual meeting this year, and we have some issues up there as well. But we are people who obey the rules, not do what we want and then ask you to change the rules on our behalf. The Evangelistos have been anything but good neighbors to all of the surrounding properties, and we have presented that information to you about the type of neighbors that they have been, not honest, not welcoming, not in any way agreeable to making the general neighborhood a place where everybody can enjoy his or her home. So we're very concerned about having tents all over the Pennington County and big white circus tents in our neighborhoods, and I don't think any of you would want that in your neighborhood either. So we thank you for the compromise, and hopefully the follow-up will be there and everybody can do business as they need to. And I know your decisions aren't easy, and this has been very drawn out, but thank you for your time, and thank you for your service, and thank you for coming up with this compromise.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further public comment? Seeing none, look for all in favor of the motion on the floor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries with 1 no, and that was for the whole.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
I'm following you.
Okay. Thank you, folks. It's been long. Appreciate you guys' efforts and willingness to work together to get this done. Next, we come to items from chair and commissioner members. 2018 proposed resolutions and policy statement changes from the South Dakota Association of County Commissioners. This was continued from last.
Chairman, these will, may I?
Go ahead, Mr. Buskard.
These will be voted on at the convention, which is starting next Sunday. And Pennington County will get 1 vote. For those of you who've never been there, it's kind of interesting. We go and have the general meeting on the last day, and you get a little paddle with your name on it, and you get to vote yes, and you hold it up. And I guess I would suggest that we vote in favor of all of the resolutions that have been proposed. Frankly, none of them really deal with Pennington County.
Yeah.
These are, most of them are presented from Minnehaha County. Majority of them will probably get passed and probably will go absolutely nowhere in the legislature. So, that's kind of what happens. But, there might be a few that are changing dates. That might pass and get through. Some of those are pretty innocuous. But anything that's got to do with money, I got a hunch the legislature's not going to be overly fond of. Of course, it'll be their first session, so you never know. But new governor, and I think they're saying 40% of the legislature will be new. So they're not going to really want to spend a lot of money. So I think that would be my suggestion is whoever's there and votes, discuss them at the time. But I guess I see nothing wrong with any of them.
So you're making a motion to support?
I think so, yes.
Second.
Motion to support by Buskard, seconded by Hadcock. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next, we come to item B, Special Animal Committee Member Appointment. And I apologize to the commission. I finally talked to Mr. Coleman after our meeting last time, and he was out of town, and so we confirmed up that he's willing to just not be a voting member but still participate. And I think, Holly, should we make a motion that he can still be on the committee but non-voting? So I'd
Motion.
moved by Hadcock, seconded by Santo to keep Mr. Coleman on the committee as a non-voting member. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, that's A and B.
I would, and I see Commissioner DeSanto is in on this next one, but since Commissioner Farabee isn't here, would it be all right to continue this, Mark, until sometime that he is here? or
Yes.
You
I'd
want to
make
do
a
it
motion
without
to
him?
continue. I would make a motion to continue.
Okay, second.
It's been moved and seconded to continue item C till next meeting,
Till, the September 18th.
till September 18th meeting. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Committee reports.
Me first?
Ms. Hadcock, we'll start with you on my left.
Fair was awesome this year, you guys. Lots of attendance, lots of people that were very, very happy. We did do something different. We got a sponsor to feed the contestants in the morning, so I was in about 7 in the morning feeding contestants, and it was pretty cool. Actually sat around the tables in the VIP in the different areas to ask people's input on the fair, and they're very pleased about how the fair runs, and probably the only thing we had a little glitch on is the VIP passes. They were trying to do it by scanning and stuff, and the scanner wasn't working very good this year, but that is the only complaint that I heard personally about the fair. Other than that, I had an awesome time. I actually went behind the scenes on some of the stuff, how they set up stages and different things just to know more. And then sat with one of the guys, his name's Lynn, he's from Nebraska. He actually he guards the governor of Nebraska. And what an interesting man, and had a really good time. He was announcing they were judging some horses that remind me of gymnastics, how they turn, how they hold the cows and different things. It was pretty cool. Very eye-opening experience for someone that's city folk, but just had a really good time learning more and more stuff about what happens at the fair. So I think they'll probably give a report later. So thank you.
Thanks, Deb.
Nothing to report?
I think the only thing I'd have to report is on the Health and Human Service Board, and there's not a lot to report there, just that I attended it and we approved it and so forth. We are going to the state municipal, I keep it in municipal league. Help me out here, Ollie.
South Dakota Association of County
There we go.
Commissioners Annual Convention.
It's been a long weekend. That's next Monday, 10th and 11th.
Correct.
Commissioner Corey, who's all going here?
I am.
I am.
It's 3 of us.
I am traveling.
Oh.
Okay,
to
so
another event that's safety training on highway equipment, heavy equipment, and that I'm going to hopefully get some information as far as it's also going to go further into types of equipment and that kind of thing, the usages of equipment. So I'll get a little more knowledge on highway department projects and how they go about them and how they make their decisions as to what they're going to do and that kind of thing.
good.
Nice.
So we got 3 of us going that I know of, which is good. I did attend the fair, see Ms. Hadcock and her family and so forth, and I think with that, I'll just...
Me? A couple things. My great-grandson got 3rd in the 4-year-old mutton busting.
Nice.
So he's taking after his great-grandpa, I guess. Take that for what it's worth. And I would like to recognize Mr. Drews and Mr. Roskinek, 2 candidates for position on this board that are making the meetings, and I think that's very good to get
Very
acquainted to
commendable.
what's going on.
Yep.
That's it.
Thanks, guys. Next on our agenda is the approval of the vouchers.
Move for approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded for approval of the vouchers. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Items from the public. Anybody from the public that have anything they'd like to speak on?
Can I go around the other side? Just kidding.
Seeing none, I'd look for a motion to adjourn fast.
So move.
Seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. We're adjourned. Thanks, folks.